of constitutional constructs and constitutional law. And so we'll look forward to that presentation. So why don't we go ahead and call the meeting to order with the calling of the roll.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Hampton,
Blessed to be here.
Councilmember Kennedy,
Here.
Councilmember Madison,
Here.
Councilmember Masuda,
Here.
Councilmember Rivas,
Here.
Councilmember Williams is absent. Vice Mayor Wilson,
Here.
Mayor Gordo.
Here,
There's a quorum of the council present.
I'll ask our Sergeant at Arms, Domino, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Sergeant?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Sergeant. And next, we'll go directly to the consent calendar. There are, oh, I'm sorry, thank you. Before we move on to the consent calendar, we do have some announcements and requests to adjourn in memory of two very important Pasadenans and contributors to Pasadena. The first is, and I really regret to inform the council and the community of the passing of our friend and colleague Betty Ho, a longtime Pasadena resident and community volunteer who passed away on January 1st of 2022. Betty served as field representative to former council member Katie Knack, served as a deputy to Mayor Bill Bogard during 15 years of working with Mayor Bogard. She provided advice on trends and developments in the city and represented the mayor at meetings, businesses, neighborhoods, arts, and other associations. She performed her duties with commitment, competence, and good judgment, and can only be described as excellent. And at the same time served as director and advisor and a volunteer for several Pasadena organizations. Her record of service with the city is exemplary. Betty served on the boards of many civic organizations, including the Armory Center for the Arts, 5 Acres, and the Pasadena Community Foundation, the YWCA of Pasadena, Pacific Oaks College and Children's School, Pasadena Education Foundation, and the Pasadena Respiratory Health Foundation, among others. She was also an advisor on the advisory board for the Pasadena Senior Center, Friends of the Levitt Pavilion, Pasadena Community Foundation, and Walden School. Betty was a member of the Community Benefits Committee at Huntington Hospital, served as president of the Pasadena Child Health Foundation, and as a member of Caltech's Committee for the Protection of Human Subjects. She was recognized by Villa Esperanza Services as a guardian angel and by Huntington Hospital as President Circle donor. Betty was an extremely valuable contributor to Pasadena and offered a thoughtful and fair approach to community issues. She worked to improve our community, devoting countless hours of dedicated support and enhance the reputation of the city among the greater community by giving of her time, talent, and resources. Betty was unique in her ability to gain confidence and friendship of all persons with whom she worked. She was truly an inspiring model for all engaged in public service and will be greatly missed. And I think we would be remiss if we didn't address the fact that Betty went about all of her duties and responsibilities in a very calm, fair, and elegant manner, and is truly one of the most elegant Pasadenans that I've ever had the opportunity to work with inside or outside of City Hall. I'm proud to call her a friend, as I know many people in this room outside of City Hall. And so I'm asking that the council adjourn in Betty's memory. I'm also sad to report on the passing of Inman Moore, longtime United Methodist minister, civil rights activist, and Pasadena businessman who passed on January 26, 2022 at the age of 96. Pastor Moore was a longtime United Methodist minister, civil rights activist, and businessman in Pasadena, who penned his autobiography, On the Road to Civil Rights, at age 90. Nearly 60 years ago, Pastor Moore was one of 28 Methodist ministers in Mississippi that signed a statement opposing the continuation of a segregated society. Some of the signees were locked out of their churches, received death threats after signing, and many ended up leaving Mississippi and headed to California, as Pastor Moore did. After ministering at Palmville United Methodist Church and Crescent Valley United Methodist Church, Pastor Moore retired in 1970, and he and his wife, Nellie, created two successful companies in Pasadena, Moore Vending and Tournament Souvenirs. They sold the business and retired in 1997, but that didn't stop Pastor Moore from continuing a life of service dedicated to promoting civil rights and social justice. He remained active in the ministry and was actively involved in a variety of civic and charitable organizations in our area. And in 2019, he and his wife of 73 years, Nellie, along with Congressman Adam Schiff, were honored by ACT for their decades of ethical leadership in and around Pasadena. Nellie passed in February, and Pastor Moore is survived by his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. He lived a long, rich life filled with service to others and to his faith. And on behalf of a grateful community, he too will be very, very missed. And again, another friend and someone who contributed greatly to Pasadena. And so I would ask that we adjourn tonight's meeting in memory of Betty Ho and Pastor Inman Moore. Thank you.
Mayor, if I may.
Mr. Kennedy?
Mayor, I want to join with your comments related both to civic leader Betty Ho and particularly to Reverend Inman Moore, who served for many years on the board of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, as well as just establishing strong relationships in the African American community in Pasadena, not behind the scenes, but on the front line, joining locked in arms, fighting for social justice, economic justice, and human rights. He was someone who cared about the least of these in our community. And in part, I think that's because, like my mother, hailing from Mississippi, he also hailed from Mississippi. And when you find someone of good character from Mississippi, you never forget them. And so we will never forget Reverend Inman Moore and his partner, Mrs. Moore, for what they've done for Pasadena, for what they've done for greater Pasadena, which includes the unincorporated area of Altadena. So thank you, Mayor Gordo, for taking the time to acknowledge Reverend Inman Moore and Betty Ho for their service to our great city.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Vice Mayor Wilson?
Thank you, Mayor, and certainly very appropriate to recognize both these pillars of our community. I didn't know Betty Ho well, but I did know Inman Moore, a man of 96 years and a bit of a role model for many of us. His wisdom, his gentle nature, his fearlessness. I think those are all things that I know I was always impressed by Inman when I spoke to him. He lived in District 7 off Cordova. I'm going to see him walking and occasionally offer him a ride. And I'm deeply saddened by his departure. Epic person in our history, and saddened to lose him. So thank you for recognizing him.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Wilson and Mr. Kennedy. With that, again, we will adjourn in memory of Betty and Inman at the end of the meeting. And let me just say, if there was a model for field deputies and field representatives and how we should work with the community, Betty Ho certainly embodied that. And I had the opportunity to work with her for a number of years. And she really served as a mentor to me and to all field reps. And so we'll adjourn in her memory, and Pastor Morris as well. Thank you. So let's move on now to the consent calendar and start with reporting out of communications.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. For item 5, we received 3 letters expressing concerns and or disappointment with the proposed integrated resource plan, power plan update, and it advocated for the city to contribute to the solutions that are needed to stop the destruction of the environment and address climate change, and provided comments on the matter. For item number 9, the city clerk's office received 12 letters providing comments, including advocating for the city manager to amend the OIS policy, demanding the termination of officers involved in the shooting of Anthony McLean, and accountability to in the Pasadena Police Department. Those correspondence were posted online, distributed to the council, and are part of the record for tonight's meeting. As a friendly reminder to the council and the public, as the mayor stated, this is a special meeting, so public comment is limited to items on the special meeting agenda. Also, as was the practice last week, when members of the public are speaking, I will ring a bell once. When 30 seconds remain on the public comment, on the person's time remaining on their public comment, and then I will notify them when their time has expired. Also, members of the public are reminded that they shall direct comments to the body as a whole and not to staff, individual members of the body, or the public. Any person making personal, impertinent, or slanderous remarks about members of the body, staff, or the public, or who shall become boisterous or threatening or personally abusive of the body, staff, or members of the public, shall be asked by the mayor to cease and desist such activity, and may be requested or required to leave the meeting in the event the behavior continues to disrupt the meeting proceedings. In terms of speakers, we have speaker cards submitted for items 1, 2, 3, and 5 on consent. So 1, 2, 3, and 5 on consent.
Okay, and then we have a number of cards related to item 9.
Yes.
And so I am going to ask the speakers to stick to the subject matter of the item that they are wishing to speak to. If you wish to speak on policing matters, then item 9, we will ask you to speak there. So for those, why don't we take a sweep motion and hold items 1, 2, 3, and 5, and I'll entertain a sweep motion for the balance of the consent calendar.
So moved.
Moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call.
1, 2, 3. So it's on consent items 4 and 6 is the sweep motion. Councilmember Hampton?
Yes.
4, 6, and 7. Sorry, my mistake. Yes. Councilmember Kennedy?
Yes.
Councilmember Madison?
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda?
Yes.
Councilmember Rivas?
Yes.
Councilmember Williams is absent. Vice Mayor Wilson?
Yes.
Mayor Gordo?
Yes.
Motion is approved without opposition.
And let's start with public comments related to item 1. And this is a vacation of easements at 951 South Fair Oaks.
So this person, Janae Lennox, put in for 1, 2, and 3, so we would ask her to speak on all 3
Okay.
and during her public comment.
Ms. Lennox, if you'll address the issue of the vacation, the selection of the CalPERS retirees, and also the contract with Creative Partners, and when we get to item 3, I'll ask the Vice Mayor to address that matter. Ms. Lennox?
Okay, so I speak from all of the items and I only have a minute.
Minute and 30 seconds. And your time is
Okay.
starting now.
All right, so it doesn't really make sense. We should actually get more time if we're gonna speak on some of the items, but okay. I first want to address that we absolutely need justice for Anthony McLean as we're going into the
Ma'am, if
Black
you
History-
stick to the issue of vacation, if you'd like to speak on police matters, that's item 9. Otherwise, this is the IRP, the item 2, the issue of vacation of a property and a contract resulting from an RFP.
with the contract with RP. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm a little confused. So I'm only speaking on not all of the items that I originally said I was gonna speak on. I'm only
So-
speaking on 2 of these items.
Which
Yes?
numbers?
Which one?
Which number 3?
Item 3, okay.
The contract.
So on item 3, we are saying that we are rejecting you guys hiring the city manager who is a pro cop. That is not what the city needs right now. We need someone who is radical and also need someone who is going to put the items that the people want on their agenda. Obviously, someone who is pro cop is going to be extremely not just biased, but they're not going to do what the people want. Obviously, we need that to happen immediately, and we need that to happen now. So we are rejecting this person who no one knows about, who is just not even part of the city. So we are rejecting that. And that is my comment on that.
Okay. Why don't we turn to item 3? Yeah, the speaker is actually incorrect about what this item represents. This is simply, and I'll turn to the Vice Mayor to introduce it. This is simply a contract to continue the search for the next city manager, and is not, as the speaker mistakenly states, a rejection or the hiring of an individual. It's, yeah, W. Brown is a company that will assist us in the search for the next city manager. And this work comes to the council as the result, and I'm speaking specifically about item 3, as the result of the work of an ad hoc committee that was chaired by Vice Mayor Wilson, and consisted of council members Rivas, Kennedy, and Mr. Masuda. And I want to thank the ad hoc committee for doing the work of going through the RFP applications and bringing us this recommendation. Vice Mayor Wilson, would you like to introduce the matter? This is item 3.
Yes, Mayor, thank you very much. And as you said, I did want to acknowledge the work of the committee and staff. There was an RFP, 6 responses were submitted and reviewed by the staff. The committee reviewed all the responses, 2 of which we brought in for interview, and actually we're impressed with both the finalists, and after extensive conversation and thorough interviews, we unanimously recommend the hiring of WBCP as the executive recruitment firm to help us source and hire the next city manager.
Thank you.
With that, I'm happy to move this item.
Okay.
Well, there's more public comments.
Yeah, there's more public comment on item 3. And just so the public is aware, the process now moves into its next phase. Should this contract be approved, there would be an ad hoc committee of 4 other members of the council who would simply review together with staff the names of applicants that are brought forward, applicants for the city manager position. Those applications would be reviewed by the ad hoc committee, and then interviews would be set up, recommended to be set up. The interviews would be conducted by the full city council. Not the ad hoc committee, but the full city council will conduct the interviews as we've done in the past. Mr. Hampton?
Is WBCP, I'm sorry, let me just ask this question. Who was the organization or firm that hired the last city manager, or that we hired for the last city manager?
It was someone else.
This is not the same firm. I just want to make sure. Okay, then
Yeah.
then I will vote in favor of
It
this.
was an individual. I'm blanking on his name, but it was.
No, you don't have to say his name.
Yeah.
It's totally fine. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't the same firm that we've used for the last 3 or 4 city managers.
No.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I would add, Mayor, that their RFP response does include aspect of community engagement and outreach, and
Yes.
that needs to be further articulated, but it was an important part of their proposal, and we specifically asked about various strategies they intend to use.
And there will be a community engagement component, as the vice mayor points out. And again, that was, I would assume, scored very highly by the ad hoc committee. Let me turn to the city manager.
Just add to that, they did say that they would be in touch with council members to get advice on what community groups or individuals need to be included in that. So you will be hearing from should this pass this evening, you will be hearing from the search company as they craft that public outreach policy.
And the city manager also informs me that this is the first time, back to Mr. Hampton's question, this is the first time we've worked with WBCP. So it's for certain a different company than the last time around, Mr. Hampton. Okay.
So,
public comment?
Public comment speakers on item 3 are Hiram Cormier Jr., Carolyn Galoni, Camille Lewis. So we'll bring in Hiram. There's also Sarah, Brittany, and Karina, and Adriana as well, and Kate McInerney on 3.
Mr. Cormier?
Hiram, you have a minute 30. Go ahead on item 3.
Okay, so yeah, so if the company, I looked on the site that was LinkedIn or whatever, and so it looks like a lot of people in that company have some pro-police leanings. It says very little about racial justice, it says very little about economic justice, et cetera, and so forth, that you guys like to pretend that you guys believe in. But if that's the case and they have those leanings, and if there's actually a former officer or some former officers within that firm, what type of city manager do you think they are going to hire? We need an independent city manager who is going to actually hold police accountable, since you guys refuse to do it. And by the way, you do have the power to do that too. But if that's the case, and then you talk about throughout the hiring process, they're going to give input to the council and to the community, what kind of community members do you want to hear from? Because when it comes to the public, first of all, I see people within that little box talking to each other and everything. But, you know, that in itself shows is that you guys do not want to hear from people. You limit their time. You mash up all of their public comment for multiple items into one time slot. It makes no sense. And then you don't even listen to the real constituents that really do go through the issues that the city manager has to take charge of that impact our lives, the people that were related to who live in Pasadena and those of us who live there ourselves. You don't listen. And that's the point. It feels like we're banging our head against the wall when we come to these fucking meetings. That's why a lot of people, frankly, don't engage in politics, because nigga,
Mr. Hiram, your time has expired.
The time for injustice expired. Fuck that firm. Do not hire.
Thank you, Mr. And for the record, Mr. Cormier is incorrect. The firm will not be hiring anybody. It's the city council who does the hiring. This firm maybe simply assist us with the logistics of the hiring process, but it's the city council who will do the hiring, the interviewing and the hiring. And I'm told that neither of the principals who are assigned by the firm have ever worked in policing. So again, incorrect point.
Mayor, I'd also add that we did evaluate the two finalists based off the diversity of the candidate pool, and they provided statistics, and this group, frankly, was a standout, and majority of their applicant pool was from diverse communities, and we thought they had a very robust strategy for filling that pipeline. So
Thank you.
carried a lot of weight in our consideration.
Carolyn Galoni, followed by Camille Lewis, followed by Sarah. You have a minute.
Hi, yeah, this is
minute
Carolyn.
30. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
this is Carolyn, and I just want to say, I know that you're saying that they have a diverse strategy and they have the candidates that they select are diverse and they go about this, but I would like to believe you, and particularly the vice mayor, I would like to, but you haven't proven to have any concern about this. And so that committee that went around picking the agency, I have no confidence. And so I really hope that you looked at that agency and said, how are they going to ensure different types of diversity? And I want to look at how they lean, where they come from, like how are they going after their potential candidates? Because while they don't hire them, they're presenting every candidate that you get. So they need to have a very robust strategy that is creative and that hasn't been heard of before, perhaps. And that isn't just like, hey, we checked off a box, we're doing what everyone says. And yeah, we have a problem in Pasadena. We have a problem. You guys have to admit this. Like, J.R. Thomas, Kendrick McDade, Anthony McLean, like, we have a problem. That's not everyone. But we have to do better in hiring a city manager. And I really hope that you guys explained how essential this is.
Ms. Galoni, your time
and
has expired.
How you failed so many times before.
Thank you, Ms. Galoni.
Camille Lewis, followed by Sarah, followed by Brittany Pollock, followed by Karina Kay, followed by Adriana Batista. Ms. Lewis, you have.
Hello, this is
Yeah.
Camille Lewis. Can you hear me?
We can. 1 minute, 30 seconds. Go ahead.
Okay, I would like to speak on item number 3. We
Right.
object to this hiring agency for the new city manager, of whom the public has never heard of until now, has pro-police employees and isn't even based in Southern California. Item number 9, regarding officer-involved shootings. Killing people on the job is not doing a good job. We
Ms.
demand
Lewis,
that you
for
fire the
item number
officer
9,
who murdered.
we're going to have separate public comments, so please keep it to item 3, please.
Okay, so yeah, what are you guys doing? Hiring an agency to find a city manager who's pro-police? We want justice for Anthony McLean. Your city has a major issue killing Black and brown people. This is not okay. Yes, you've hired some like agency to find a city manager who's probably going to be pro-police. And you're probably hiring an agency that's not even based in Southern California to find a city manager for Pasadena. We want justice for Anthony McLean and all of the people that were murdered by Pasadena police. You have a major problem. Not having this meeting in person is not going to make your problem better. Oh, put your drink down. That is so rude. Wow. You know who else can't drink anything? All the people that were murdered by the Pasadena City Police.
Oh.
God, you're so smug. Seriously.
Your time
Councilman
is
John
has
Kennedy,
expired.
just
Thank
drinking
you.
Anything is so
Ma'am.
disrespectful.
Ma'am, if you will stick to item 3, thank you. Time is up.
Sarah, followed by Brittany Pollock, followed by Karina Kay, followed by Adriana Batista, followed by Kate McInerney. 1 minute and 30 seconds. Go ahead.
Yes, hi, hello. I just want to start off by saying thank you for itemizing officer-involved shootings. At the beginning of the meeting, you spoke of several civil rights activists. I just want to point out that us community members calling in are also activists. We're demanding rights for Black and brown residents of Pasadena.
Ma'am,
such as Anthony
if you'll address item 3, the contract.
I am. I just
Okay,
trying to say
thank you.
thank you, but okay.
Okay, thank you.
So we're calling in demanding justice for Black and Brown residents of Pasadena, such as Anthony McLean and J.R. Thomas. If you really value civil rights, then you'll listen to what we have to say. We demand that you hire a city manager who will prosecute racist killer cops. You constantly state that you cannot fire these cops yourself, but you can hire someone who can. If you really value civil rights, then you won't make it okay for officers to kill people and still keep their jobs, such as they did with J.R. Thomas. He got murdered in front of his children inside his home. Those cops are still on the job. If you guys really stand for civil rights, then you'll hire a city manager who also does. Thank you. Black Lives Matter.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Brittany Pollock, followed by Karina Kay, followed by Adriana Batista, followed by Kate McInerney. That'll complete item 3. And we'll have item 5 as well. Ms.
Can you all
Pollock,
hear me?
yes, we can. 1 minute, 30 seconds. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to highlight some of the points that other folks have made. And in particular, the first person who spoke, Hiram, he was trying to tell you all something, and we can see on the Zoom that you, Mayor, are talking to other people while people are giving public comments. This is so disrespectful. Why do you all even have this time period if you're not going to attentively listen to what the community has to say? It's like it's for a performance, like most of what you all do. So when people are talking about this firm having pro-police leanings and all we hear is your just objection to that, Mayor, someone has done their research. Why aren't you listening to that? What is the purpose of public comment other than for the public to comment on these agenda items that you all are voting on? We are telling you that this company that you are trying to hire to, I guess, do your job for you, I don't really know, has pro-police leanings, and this is not the avenue that you want to take. And you all are just saying, no, no, no. What is this for? I'm just like confused. And also embarrassed for you all. Like, please, can we just make some movements in the right direction? We're talking about justice, but like, what does that mean to you all? I'm really asking you to maybe like reflect on these kinds of questions as everybody comes
Ms.
here.
Pollock, your time has expired.
Thank you, Ms. Pollock.
Appreciate it.
Karina Kay, followed by Adriana Batista, followed by Kate McInerney, followed by Cynthia Canati and Carl Selkin on item 5. Karina, you have 1
Hello,
minute,
my
30
name's
seconds.
Karina.
Go ahead.
My name's Karina. I'm a Pasadena resident and a member of Black Lives Matter Los Angeles. And regarding number 3, this W. Brown Creative Partner Services that you are just now introducing to the public, to the city council, and already about to authorize a contract for $32,000. This is a problematic agency. We have already demanded the firing of the city manager. Why? Because they refuse to hold the Pasadena Police Department accountable. You refuse to hold the Pasadena Police Department accountable. So we object to another problematic agency who's going to come up with problematic candidates for you all to still not do the job. We'll be calling for their firing as well, because you're not going to vet them to fire the officers. You're not going to vet them to bring about justice and accountability for the murder of Anthony McLean. That's the problem here. We don't want to sit through the same perpetuation of injustice and death of Black people in Pasadena. You could demand this right now. We have no faith that you are going to put a person in there that is going to hold the Pasadena Police Department accountable. You all could do that right now, but instead you're spending more money on a problematic agency, and you're not going to vet them the way that this city needs to. So all of you all, that's why we object to it. That is my public comment. Put that for the record and stop saying that people are wrong. You're wrong, Victor Gordo. You ran on all these promises for public safety and for justice, and you ain't doing nothing. You're terrible as hell. And the rest of the city council is following.
Ms. Karina, your time has expired.
The city manager who is going to hold people accountable, not be a face on white supremacy.
The next speaker
Thank
is
you, ma'am.
Adriana Batista.
Ms. Batista, welcome.
1 minute, 30 seconds. Go ahead. Ms. Batista.
We want a city manager who will use their authority to do a thorough admin investigation of all officer-involved shootings and fire and discipline officers who are out of policy. Someone who won't use the weak excuse that I'm not a politician. Like we all remember Steve Mermel saying, I'm not a politician, when we need somebody who's going to acknowledge that the city manager's office, while they might technically, payroll speaking, be city staff, they hold more power in the city of Pasadena than all of you in city council combined. So yes, this person is political. This position is political. And whoever is hired needs to understand that and understand that that's problematic and work with the community to engage and care for the community. And part of that is enacting accountability at PPD. Why? Because the community has been demanding it. Why? Because it could save lives, as we've seen officers Matthew, Griffin, and Newland and Gomez have been involved in multiple officer-involved shootings, murders of innocent Black men.
Your time has expired.
This needs to stop.
Thank you. Kate McInerney, followed by Cynthia Canati, followed by Carl Selkin, and it looks like we got a couple more speakers on item 3, Alan Shea and Jasmine Richards Abdullah. Ms. McInerney, 1 minute and 30 seconds, *6 to unmute. Go ahead.
Hi. So clearly there are a lot of issues with your all's process on trying to hire this external agency to hire a city manager that, you know, community members don't know about and don't trust for good reason. And so rather than doing all that, why not just pay community members to, I guess, consult or to advise on not only hiring a city manager, because that's kind of like besides the point. Like the point is justice, and community members have the answer. So hire Black and Brown community members to consult with, rather than throwing money at a bunch of external agencies that are not from Pasadena, are not familiar with you know, life in Pasadena, and when they have questionable backgrounds. And this is a matter of justice that community members know and embody and show up here. Like we have, you know, their own interests, and instead it's always, oh, we have to hire this and that person, when the answers are right here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, madam.
We'll bring in Cynthia Canati, followed by Carl Selkin, followed by Alan Shea, followed by Jasmine Richards Abdullah.
Good evening.
Good evening.
This is
1 minute, 30
Kennedy. I'm
seconds. Go ahead.
on Item 5.
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Good evening, council members. I'm reading a letter from Martha Zavala, president of the Pasadena League of Women Voters. In order to keep to the 3-minute time limit, I am omitting some sentences from the letter that was delivered to you today. The League of Women Voters, Pasadena area, believes that the source of our energy supply is fundamental to Pasadena's response to the climate crisis.
Ma'am, we have the letter. If you want to just address the points rather than read the letter.
You have 1 minute and 2 seconds left in your comments.
Excuse me, I'm unclear about what I'm being asked to do. The letter is the comment. May I read the excerpts from the letter?
Sure, you have 1 minute and 2 seconds left. Go ahead.
We can have EV incentives in electrified buildings, but if the energy source is still gas or coal, we are not reducing dangerous greenhouse gas emissions. We note several worrisome elements about the PWP IRP 2021 update. The plan is only to comply with California state law that 60% of energy source is renewable by 2030, and even that is described in a tentative manner. There is no mention of any more ambitious plan to achieve 100%, 90%, or 70% renewable energy. The update relies heavily on spot purchases, which are not identifiable as renewable or fossil fuel. Distributed energy solutions such as microgrids and community solar for low-income housing, schools, and other institutions are omitted from the planning. The true social cost of carbon is not taken into account. Further, using a discount rate to work on such a this analysis treats
Ms. Kanadi, your
greenhouse gas
time has
emissions
expired.
as a tolerable cost of doing business. I'm very disappointed that we weren't given the 3 full minutes that are supposed to be allotted.
We'll call Carl Selkin, followed by Alan Shea, followed by Jasmine Richards Abdullah. Mr. Selkin, 1 minute, 30 seconds. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Okay, I'll try to keep in that timeline. First of all, I want to point out that I did submit a letter to you on behalf of the Social Justice Committee, Pasadena Jewish Temple and Center, about item 5. And I'd just like to kind of highlight a few things in that letter. One is the IRP projects a, unfortunately, too long timeline to accomplish the much needed urgent solutions to the ending of fossil fuel reliance for power. Second, I'd like to point out that the idea of electric energy is related to other issues like affordable housing, jobs, et cetera, that need to be addressed in a comprehensive, integrated fashion, not piecemeal in the silos that are typical of bureaucratic decision-making. And finally, I'd just like to say that this is an urgent situation. The climate crisis is growing exponentially, and small steps do not produce the change that's needed within the short timeline that we have. And we need to not only accommodate what California State is asking us to do, but we will now and will in the future have to accommodate the larger pressures that will come down on us. And we should anticipate those and take action now rather than waiting for us to be told what to do. I hope we can join the Clean Power Alliance and further the ends of getting rid of greenhouse gases in our mix of energy.
Thank you, Mr. Selkin.
Alan Shea, followed by Jasmine Richards Abdullah, followed by Julia R., followed by Heavenly Hughes on item 3.
Mr. Shea.
If you can unmute. I think you need to get his cell phone. There he is. Yes, we can. 1 minute and 30 seconds. Go ahead.
I wanted to just
Mr. Shea, it seems you have 2 devices on. Alan, you'll turn one off. Alan, why don't we put you on hold while you turn one device on and we'll come back to you.
Jasmine Richards Abdullah.
Ms. Abdullah?
She
She
dropped.
dropped, okay.
Julia R.
Ms. R?
Julia, if you can *6 to unmute. 1 minute and 30 seconds. Go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can. Go ahead.
Would like to continue to uplift what your community members are talking about here. You have an opportunity to bridge a gap between your community members and you. You have no reason to have their trust right now because you have continued to prove that you are not listening to them. This hiring, this hearing of your community's concerns is your job. This is your job. Do not waste this opportunity to bridge a gap here. You have to consider what your community members have said in this meeting because it will continue. Do you understand this? We are not here to let this cycle continue. It has to end. We have to have justice for Anthony McLean, and there cannot be a continuation of pro-police in your city. It is unbelievable. You have a problem in Pasadena, and your community members want to work. They want to fix it. You have a community engaged and proud to be from Pasadena.
Julia,
You
your
want-
time has
what
expired.
better way of explaining that?
Thank you, Ms. Hart.
Thank you. Alan Shea, sorry, Heavenly Hughes. Let's try Heavenly. Miss Hughes, if you can unmute.
Ms. Hughes, you're muted.
There you go.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Yes.
1 minute, 30 seconds on item 3. Go ahead.
Agenda item number 3. Will you hire a city manager who will put a stop to police violence, Jim Crow tactics, and break down the infrastructure of white supremacy within the city of Pasadena? Mayor Gordo, when will you work with the community instead of dismissing and derating and giving false information to the public comment, callers, and to the community? I recall last time I was here, you said you had called me several times and that you would call me again. I don't think that you should lie to sit in that position. I would also like to add, will you all include the Community Police Oversight Committee when choosing the new city manager? Will they have a vote? Will you include the community in what they are saying when it comes to hiring a new city manager? Cynthia Kurt, we asked you to hear our voices today. We have been calling in for over a year about police accountability. We ask you to be sure that it is the frontline leadership that you all want to see Black lives being protected and served in our community. We want a city manager
Miss
that
Hughes, your
cares
time has
about
expired.
Black lives.
Thank you, Ms. Hughes.
Thank you. Jasmine Richards Abdullah. No, still has disconnected. Let's try Alan Shea.
Mr. Shea?
Let's see. Mr. Shea, go ahead. 1 minute, 30 seconds.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, Your Honorable Victor Gordo. I just want to share with the City Council and everyone who's listening. Every move that the council make is so imperative at this point. And if you fail to consider the voices that are calling on you, it's only going to darken the mark that we're experiencing now with injustice. I truly believe that Victor Gordo holds in his heart a sense of true justice. He's a man of Pasadena, and I really believe that he's going to allow us the right opportunity to select the right city manager. So I would just hope that the council and those that are listening allow that this to move forward so we can put the past behind us properly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shea.
Thank you. That completes public comment on the consent calendar.
Okay, so looking at the remainder of the consent calendar, I'll entertain a motion on items 1, 2, 3, and 5.
So moved, Mayor.
Mayor?
Mr.
Oh, no,
Hampton?
it's fine. I just had to be responsive to the public commenters who have called about the firm. I understand, I mean, this is just a firm, so it's not necessarily meaning that we're going to hire exactly what they're saying in the public comments. We ultimately, as a city council, will make that decision of who the next city manager will be. But I think it may be helpful to have the firm come after they're hired and explain to us what their outreach is going to be as it relates to getting applicants, and then also what their outreach is going to be, as the Vice Mayor mentioned, their engagement with the community as a whole, as well as the council. I think that might be just helpful, or even I think that'd be helpful to have them come and just say that in a meeting of the city council, or another committee, maybe let's call, I don't know what committee it would fall in, but I think that would be helpful. And then to the public speakers that have called in and, want to make sure that the council is picking someone who is going to be mindful of people's rights, et cetera. I think it's important that all of you get together and put a list of good names together and have them apply for the job. I think that would be very helpful versus just, tearing down the idea of hiring a firm. No matter what firm we hire, every firm is going to have some sort of connection to law enforcement, because a lot of these firms hire police chiefs. They hire other people within law enforcement. So I think that your best bet is to actually work together and figure out some great candidates to make sure that they apply as the next city manager for the city of Pasadena. So, Mayor, hopefully we can get the firm to come and just give us just a update of how their outreach is going to be.
Yeah, there is an outreach and community engagement component. So once that's prepared, I'll work with the city manager and staff to make that known and bring it forward, either through committee or the council. I think that's a good suggestion, so that people are clear on what the process is. Okay, there's a motion and a second. Roll call.
For items 1, 2, 3, and 5, do we have a second? Sorry, I know that Mr. Vice Mayor Wilson.
I'll second it.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Hampton. So it was moved by Vice Mayor Wilson, seconded by Councilmember Hampton. Councilmember Hampton?
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy?
Yes.
Councilmember Madison?
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda?
Yes.
Councilmember Rivas?
Yes.
Councilmember Williams is absent. Vice Mayor Wilson?
Yes.
Mayor Gordo?
Yes.
The motion is approved without opposition.
Next, and this is a pretty routine matter. The item 8, the amendment to the 21-22 annual action plan.
This is the time and place for the public hearing on the substantial amendment to the 2021-2022 annual action plan. On December 30th, 2021 and January 20th, 2022, the public hearing notice was published in the Pasadena Journal and the Pasadena Press. No correspondence was received by the city clerk's office regarding this item.
Colleagues, what's your pleasure? Do we need a presentation?
Mayor,
I think,
if I may, can I recommend that we close the public hearing and move to the substantive matter of approving this?
It's been moved to close the public hearing. Are there any public comments?
There are not.
None. Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Masuda. Roll call.
To close the public hearing, Councilmember Hampton?
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy?
Yes.
Councilmember Madison?
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda?
Yes.
Councilmember Rivas?
Yes.
Councilmember Williams is absent. Vice Mayor Wilson?
Yes.
Mayor Gordo?
Yes.
Public hearing is
Mayor
closed.
Gordo, I'd like to recommend that we approve agenda item 8. That's it.
Okay. It's a good suggestion.
Seconded by Councilmember
Second by
Masuda.
Mr. Masuda. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Masuda. And again, these are good amendments. For those that are interested in the amendments, they're on item 2 of the staff report. And it's adding money to rental assistance and eviction assistance, administrative costs, and then also security enhancements, cameras at Robinson, LaPinte, and Villa Park, both the community center of Robinson and the park. So these are good use of these dollars. There's a motion and a second. Roll call.
Councilmember Hampton?
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy?
Yes.
Councilmember Madison?
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda?
Yes.
Councilmember Rivas?
Yes.
Councilmember Williams is absent. Vice Mayor Wilson?
Yes.
Mayor Gordo?
Yes.
The motion is approved without opposition.
Thank you. And
Uh,
that
Mayor, I
moves,
have a question
yes.
just about item 8 really quickly. When will the, and this is for the city manager, when will the update for La Pintoresca, Park, for cameras, when will that come back to us? Is that gonna come back to us, or is that already just?
I think that this completes the funding, but I certainly would be glad to get a schedule and put it in the weekly letter so that all of the council would know the schedule for La Pinteresta.
Okay, thank you.
If that's, all right.
Maybe we just do it for all of them.
Yeah.
Complete schedule, Mayor, if we could have a complete schedule for all of the updates, that would make sense.
That's what
For all the cameras.
yeah, I just suggested that to the city manager, Mr. Kennedy, so we'll have a schedule.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Mayor.
Okay, next, item 9, and we'll welcome the chief and lieutenant.
Yes, Mayor, I would, this is Michelle Bonarise, the city attorney. And along with the city manager staff, our staff has put together a presentation that was presented. It's very similar to the presentation that was presented to the Public Safety Committee in October of 2021 regarding police officer involved shooting investigation processes and related policies. So the presentation will be, we'll start off with Chief Assistant City Attorney Javon Radd, and he will be joined by Lieutenant Carolyn Gordon. And we also have our interim chief, Cheryl Moody, who is here, and I think she may have some information to add as well. So I think once that's presented, then we can have the public comment and whatever other questions you have from the council.
This special meeting and this presentation is intended to be responsive to some of the requests to agendize matters that the council simply does not have the authority under state law or the charter to do. And I know that some of the people who make the requests may not be aware of that. Some of them live in Los Angeles or other parts of Southern California. And I think it's important for all of us to have an opportunity to discuss the limitations. You know, the council does not have all of the authority that sometimes we're asked to employ or exercise. And in some cases, it requires a change of the charter, and a change of the charter can be enacted, certainly, can be suggested and requested by members of the public, and then the people of Pasadena, residents of Pasadena, would have a vote up or down on whether or not we should change the charter and change the way we operate our local government in the city of Pasadena. Other cities have different models. Los Angeles, for example, has a different charter than our charter, giving authority that's different than the authority we have to various agencies within the city. The county has a different charter. And so we have to deal within the limitations and restrictions of the charter. And so why don't we go ahead and start the presentation, and then we can explore some of these areas. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I'm going to be starting and then turning over to the chief and Lieutenant Gordon for a bit, and then concluding the presentation. So, Mayor, as you mentioned, the Pasadena as a charter city, there are over 120 charter cities in California. There are actually over 480 cities, but only a little over 120 are charter cities. With Pasadena's charter, the Pasadena voters have set up what's called a council manager form of government. So there's a limited number of officials responsible for city administration: city attorney, prosecutor, city manager, and city clerk. So as it's relevant here, the council, as the charter sets up, instructs the manager on how to set up policies. And then the council also passes ordinances approving projects and also the city's annual budget every June. And the city manager is more of the day-to-day decision maker, implementing policies, advising the city council on what's going on, and making recommendation on things, formulating budget, and finally overseeing the administration and management of staff. And that's really relevant to the discussion here. So to summarize some of the Pasadena charter provisions, which actually are found in other cities' charters, the council they may inquire into administrative matters under the manager, and they can instruct the manager in all matters of policy. But the council cannot attempt to influence or direct any subordinates under the city manager. And so with there's a published court case out of Santa Monica where a council member was asking staff what's going on with the project, what do they need, what does the applicant need to do for a permit, just asking planning staff what's going on with the project. And in that case, the court held that the council member in Santa Monica, which has a charter provision similar to Pasadena in this area, the council member was only inquiring what was going on. The council member was not instructing. So basically, you get kind of a good exposition on what the similar treatment would be for Pasadena. Again, council members can inquire about what's going on, but they can't attempt to influence subordinates under the manager. So for relevant charter provisions and one Muni Code section, basically the council, the city manager is responsible for supervision and control over city departments. City manager also is responsible for appointing department heads. City manager is responsible for administrative service under him or her. The charter essentially prevents the council from imposing discipline on police officers, and I'll go into that in a little bit of detail. And the charter can only be amended by Pasadena voters, so this isn't something the council could deal with. So as it relates to officer-involved shootings, a couple of points on this. If the chief of police were to hypothetically find an officer acted within policy after a shooting, the manager would never, the matter would never get to the city manager to decide, because the officer would be found within policy, and that would be the end of the discussion. So there's really nothing for the council to even reach out to the manager about. It would be within policy at the chief's level. On the other hand, if there were a matter that did get to the city manager, for example, after disciplinary arbitration, in other words, if the chief were to impose discipline, the officer were to appeal that, it goes to what's called advisory arbitration, where evidence is put on by both sides and witnesses, and then the arbitrator issues an advisory decision. The manager then would issue his or her final rendering on that. We still don't believe the council has a role under the way the charter's set up, because we need to give effect to all of the charter provisions, and basically the council intervening in the manager's decision also presents an issue, because the memorandums of understanding with different labor unions, including PPOA and others, generally provide that the manager ultimately decides things after disciplinary arbitration. So for that sort of explains the second bullet here about the council is prevented from imposing discipline on police officers. This would be practically how that would play out. The other thing is, and Lieutenant Gordon is going to talk about criminal investigations and administrative reviews, but just to give the council a little bit of an overview of the various levels of review that do happen on officer-involved shootings. And this isn't sort of something that happens on every single incident. Lieutenant Gordon will talk about where things do happen, but there is a lot of review that does happen on officer-involved shootings already. First, out of a criminal investigation, after the police department detectives deal with it, the LA County District Attorney would review it. California Attorney General might review it. This is some state laws passed in 2020 and 2021, allowing for the AG, or requiring the AG, to investigate shootings of unarmed civilians, or where there's a reasonable dispute whether the civilian was unarmed generally speaking, the district attorney's office, if they clear the officer, they issue a public written report. The attorney general's office, I think, is also anticipating to do the same. And finally, where where the U.S. Department of Justice, where a matter is either referred to them or whether they might investigate on their own, they might take a look at the matter. Independently, and Lieutenant Gordon's going to talk about this, the Pasadena Police Department, concluding with a rendering by the Chief of Police, who conduct an administrative review on the shooting to determine whether the officer acted within policy. And finally, there might be, in some instances, an independent review of an officer-involved shooting. For example, with Pasadena, the city has contracted in the past for some independent reviews, and there's also an independent review pending on the officer-involved shooting death of Anthony McLean. And then independently, whether it either by the council's request perhaps, or even the Community Oversight Police Commission, if there were the budget for it, the independent police auditor conceivably might review a shooting, not only for the officer's tactics and how the shooting played out itself, but also the department's rendering on the shooting in the administrative review to ensure that it was thorough, fair, and impartial. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Moody and Lieutenant Gordon to discuss a little more on the administrative reviews and the criminal investigations into the shooting.
Yes, Lieutenant Gordon will talk about the policy and the process by which we conduct our officer-involved shootings first.
Good evening, thank you. So what I'm going to walk you through today is about our officer-involved shooting and in custody death. So what happens is, and then the watch commander contacts the detective lieutenant, provides some facts, and then the lieutenant will contact his team, which would involve a sergeant and then more than likely 4 detectives. They will respond to the scene. When they respond to the scene, they will get a brief as to what occurred on the incident. Also, one of the things that's a responsibility of the sergeant will contact and notify the district attorney's office. Once the detectives are there, they've been briefed, then there's a walkthrough. They do a walkthrough of the scene. Once they do the walkthrough of the scene belongs to the detectives. The detectives will ask some questions and make sure that the public safety questions have been answered, like how many times the officer fired, in what direction. Those are all public safety. The description of the suspect, description of the car, are all the questions detectives will ask. After they're done, they'll walk the DAs through the scene, and that's the district attorneys. And when completed, the case is submitted to the district attorney's office, where a prosecutor reviews the case to decide if the officer's actions were justified under criminal law. So we have some new exciting things that are coming in the spring of 22 by Axon. The first is Performance. It's a software product that provides analytics of body-worn camera use and helps to ensure user accountability. The other thing is the Signal Sidearm. It wirelessly activates recording on body-worn cameras within range the moment the firearm is removed from the holster. And so this Signal Sidearm is going to be on the holster. So anytime that you remove the weapon from the holster, it's going to activate your body-worn camera. And so those are a couple of the things that we're looking forward to that the police department will have in 2022. Change to the next slide. The next one is the administrative review, and that's the professional standards unit. And so I am the lieutenant over the professional standards unit. And what we do is that after the detectives get on scene, they will notify us. We respond to the scene, we get a small brief, but our briefing comes from the detectives, and then we do a walkthrough. We walk through the scene. We look for policy violations, we look for training issues, and we're also risk managers. And so we look for things that we can make better for the next time, or some things that are concerning, and we take notes to those facts. When we're completed, before we get to the completion, we go back to the station. We will later talk with the CRIM side, that's the Criminal Investigation Division, and we will find out if the officers gave a statement. If they gave a statement, we'll review the statement when the case is complete. If not, there's something where the officer doesn't give a statement, and we will compel the officer to talk. And so we will do only the interviews where the officers did not give a statement, because we'd like the information when it's fresh in their mind a few days after the incident occurred. When that's done, the crim side is complete. They turn it over to us. We view it. If there's additional witnesses or anything that we feel we need to do, then our unit does that. We look at all the evidence, all the interviews, and when we're done, we present that case to the chief of police, who will determine if the officer's actions were in conformance with PPD policy and training. And those are the things that are important for the administrative side. And I just wanted to be clear that the administrative side is different from the crim side. Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant Gordon. Javon?
Mayor, a couple more slides before finish up. So with respect to the chief determining whether the officer's actions were within policy, that's basically the point in time if the chief were to impose discipline. That would be, that's sort of a critical time period for what's called the Peace Officers Bill of Rights, or Public Safety Officers Procedural Bill of Rights. Basically for law enforcement, they must notify the officer within 1 year of discovery of the policy violation in order to impose discipline. The Peace Officer Bill of Rights offers several instances where that limitation period can be tolled or extended out. A couple of those instances allowing for tolling of the limitation period are provided here. Again, it's not required, but the limit that a department wait until the end of the tolling period, but a department can. And a couple opportunities for department to take advantage of tolling are whether the officer's actions are the subject of criminal investigation or prosecution, or if the matters in litigation, in civil litigation, and the officer is a defendant in that matter. So in terms of sort of this agenda item and the question of the council's ability to impose a deadline on the department to conduct administrative reviews, that's the personnel reviews that Lieutenant Gordon talked about. We believe the charter, which expresses the council manager form of government, prevents such a policy because it's a personnel matter and it's under the administrative service of the city manager. And in terms of reading Pasadena's charter to try to give effect to as much of the charter as possible, we believe that the council could not necessarily impose a deadline for the department to complete the reviews. However, the council might wish to consider policies to recommend or changes in policy and to recommend those to the city manager. So I think there's still area for discussion and area for the manager to consider with the chief in this area. In terms of thinking about it sort of on a more practical level, these are some reasons sort of on why thinking about things on a case-by-case assessment for whether to complete a review might be better than just imposing a hard stop policy, or either to say accelerate all reviews, or in the alternative to take advantage of tolling under Peace Officer Bill of Rights under every circumstance. First, if the department were to complete the administrative review within a specified time period, in terms of matter of weeks, months, whatnot, there might be information from related investigations or proceedings that the department wouldn't have access to. And once the chief renders, the chief has rendered. With that being said, there might be circumstances where there's a serious policy violation and where the department's confident enough in that, that the department might not need additional evidence to develop. And one example of that is last year there was the Long Beach School District police officer that was terminated before being charged by the district attorney's office, but about 3 weeks after the officer was terminated, the school district officer was charged by the district attorney's office. But again, that's an instance where the school district had confidence that there was a serious violation of policy, and they did move to terminate the officer. In terms of deferring completion of the administrative review until certain periods, there's some arguments for that. Because if the department were to wait until the district attorney's office completes its criminal investigation, again, that doesn't have to happen every time, but in most instances, that might be the best practice to consider, because professional standards might be informed by what the DA does, not only what the DA investigates, but particularly over the last 10 years or so, the district attorney's office has put out very detailed public reports when officers are cleared, and necessarily if charges are filed, then the internal affairs can benefit from the language in a criminal complaint against the officer. If the department were to render before that, they wouldn't get to see that type of work product from the district office. In addition, if the department were to wait until civil litigation were to conclude, internal affairs would be informed by what the officer testified to in deposition and at trial, and if the officer, for example, testified consistently or inconsistent with his or her statements the night of or after the incident, like Lieutenant Gordon talked about, one way or another, there would be either a voluntary statement or perhaps a compelled statement shortly after the incident. There would be deposition testimony and trial testimony to benchmark on that initial statement, and the department could review for consistency along those lines. So with that, I think that completes our presentation, Mayor, and we're available for questions.
Thank you. Questions, comments from members of the council? Ms. Rivas, followed by Mr. Kennedy, and then Vice Mayor Wilson.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Thank you so much, Mayor. I wanted to start by thanking Councilmember Hampton for asking this matter to be heard at public safety and now before the full council. I think it's really important that the council and both the council and the public hear and understand these processes and really have a clear understanding of what the different duties are between the council and the city manager. And these processes are really long and drawn out, and it's definitely one of my biggest frustrations as a council member. This weekend, I just took a look at the district attorney's office website, where all the JACE letters are, which are the determinations on officer involved shootings. And looking at the ones that came out most recently, the last couple months, I saw that they came out anywhere from a year to over 4 years after the incident. So it's a pretty big amount of time. So while I absolutely see the value of the department and the city manager and staff waiting for that JACE letter, we just have to acknowledge we're in the reality we are in, where it's taking years for that to come out. So my initial question for staff, and I think I'd like to hear from police department, city attorney, city manager, whoever wants to chime in. Do you ever think there should be an upper limit? Clearly, we think waiting several years is in the city's interest, but there's got to be a point where maybe we need to move on and move forward with our own administrative process. Can't wait an infinite amount of time. I'm guessing 10 years is maybe too silly. And I'm sure you're going to say it's a case-by-case basis, but I'd just love to hear your thoughts on what do we do when these investigations are that drawn out. We're talking about 4 or 5+ years.
If I may, Councilmember Rivas. So, like you said, it's a case-by-case basis. And like Javon Rad mentioned, if there's something that we see immediate, we normally won't wait for the district attorney's letter. If we see that we need to take action immediately, there's a clear violation of the law, then we will do that. We won't wait for a clearance letter. But what we found is the district attorney's letter is another arm of the criminal investigation. So if we jump ahead too soon, we may miss something. We may miss some statements that they made to the district attorney's office. So that is why we wait. I don't think we've had one to go as far as 10 years, but I don't project that we will.
Yeah, just throwing that out as the extreme example. But I appreciate your perspective. I totally understand the need to wait and have all the information available. I get that. I don't know if the city attorney or the city manager want to chime in. I had one more question.
I would just note that, as you mentioned, it of necessity is on a case-by-case basis. And if we do get to a situation where it's taking several years, we look at all of the facts, and it may be appropriate to do something sooner than whatever's going on. So I think the key is kind of like you know it when you see it. When it's too long from a multiple purpose perspective in terms of the factors that Mr. Rad mentioned, then that's when it would be appropriate to do something. But it depends on the particular case.
Understood. So this is something that's constantly under consideration with each case that is, as it moves along.
Correct.
I don't know, council member, if
Oh,
I
go
can.
ahead, sorry.
I don't know that I
Go
can
ahead,
add
go ahead.
anything of real value. I think it's both the community and the officers are not well served when it drags on and on. I don't think there are a lot of cases that go 4 years, but just looking at what I've seen at the DA's office, over a year is pretty typical. That doesn't make it right. It's just really typical. And I would hope at some point the entire system can be looked at, not just one city, and there be some parameters placed on the DA as to how long they have to respond. Because there are a lot of people waiting for answers, not just in Pasadena, but other places. And it's really unfair, as I say, to both the officer and the community, in my mind.
Yeah, it's just incredibly frustrating. So thank you for that. I had one more question that I believe is best directed to the city attorney. Charter Section 604, which addresses the city manager's powers and duties. The last section, subsection J, talks about the council's ability to any action by the city manager. And I've seen folks point to that section as giving the council power to review even personnel decisions. So I was wondering if the city attorney could kind of clarify and speak to that section specifically in the context of this conversation.
Sure. And Councilmember Rivas, I had tried to flesh that out on one of the bullets, and I'll call out a few of the other charter sections. I didn't cite them by number, but sort of in summary, one charter section 409 talks about who the council can appoint, and it lists the manager, the city attorney, the prosecutor, and the clerk. It doesn't list any other staff that would be appointed. Another charter section 411 says council shall deal with administrative service under the city manager solely through the city manager. And then the charter section you mentioned 604J does talk about sort of calling up decisions by the manager. But the problem with that is if a personnel matter can be called up, just to sort of try to understand the charter, then it kind of takes out the value of the charter section that says really the council's point hire and fire goes beyond the 4 folks specified in another charter section. And it also seems to subvert administrative service. Additionally, as a practical matter, it seems to me that most manager decisions that the council might talk about are decisions not that an officer acted outside of policy and should have their job back, but it's where the chief might render a shooting within policy. And so in those instances, nothing would be with the manager to even decide, because it would be the chief that would have rendered the officer within policy, and that's not something that we believe continues to get called up. So at some level, no matter how you slice it, it becomes difficult for the council to get a handle on the things that at least there may be interest in. The way the charter reads, we don't read it as something that it allows the council to act on. And the final point would be that even if we could get past the charter, then there's the question of what about the bargaining unit agreements that say that the manager decides. And so how do we reconcile the council calling up something that the city's already agreed that the manager gets to decide?
Great, yeah, thank you for that. I know reading that one section alone is not, it reads very broadly. And so I appreciate hearing your perspective or hearing the interpretation, which I agree with. I defer to your interpretation of the charter, but it also makes a lot of sense that, reading as a whole, you have to read it in that way. So I appreciate you explaining that. Those are all my questions right now, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Wilson. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Kennedy was next. No,
Yeah, I think
Vice
Mr.
Mayor Wilson.
Kennedy was next.
Go ahead, Andy. I think John took himself out of the queue.
Did John pull himself out? Okay, I had a few questions as well. Javon, I was confused about, in your presentation, and once again, we have a slightly different version in our binder than what you shared, so the page numbering may be wrong. But it says, I think on my version, it says page 3, council may instruct city managers in all matters of policy. Do you see that on, I don't know if that's 3 in presentation you showed.
It's the same page.
Councilmember Wilson, yes, the only difference from what we put up this evening was just one additional slide about various bodies might review, which is slide 5. But other than that, the presentation that was posted with the agenda packet is the same. So slide 3 does talk about the council may inquire and may instruct, but they may not attempt to influence or direct any subordinates of the manager.
Yeah, but the statement before that is may instruct city manager on all matters of policy. And then I'm on page 9, which I'm guessing since you added a page is now page 10, which is city council ability to impose deadline on PPD to complete administrative reviews. Says council manager, form of government, establish and try to prevent such council adopted policies. So this
Okay, I see
the
what you're saying,
policy.
Vice Mayor Wilson. So with the second slide, that's a more general attempt to summarize the council manager form of government and not to quote Pasadena's charter specifically, but to speak more generally. And I think other than this kind of a unique example of the question of can the council set a deadline on the completion of administrative reviews of officer-involved shootings, there's any number of other things that do come to the council as a matter of policy where the council might be able to instruct on. This just happens to be one of those territories that other provisions of the charter prevent the council from acting in that regard.
So the
And remind
distinction
me
is
what-
because it's personnel.
But it's a personnel, it's not about a specific person. It's a personnel policy, and you're saying the council cannot impose policy that relates to personnel separate from individual actions against named discrete individuals. Is that what you're saying?
I think even in the generic sense, it would be a type of rule that would subvert that would take away the authority of the chief to act within his or her discretion, like Chief Moody was talking about in terms of to the question from Councilmember Rivas, how long do you wait or how long is reasonable? And that would be something that takes away the chief's discretion. And here with the council dealing with administrative service and basically just let the manager deal with administrative service, that's essentially what the charter says. We believe that a council imposing a policy, even though it's a general broad matter and not an individual personnel matter, as you indicate, Vice Mayor, I still think because that would be taking away the chief's authority to set policy, I think that would still present an issue under the charter and the city manager's authority.
Which is different than us to say, we're going to set a policy that building permits expire in 2 years, for instance. Right? We could set a
Yes.
timeline, and I know we have. Then I wanted to go to the scenario, and I apologize, I can't remember the specifics, but there was an incident where, and I think it was last year, I believe it was last year, it was a year and a half ago, where there was somebody who had a car who I think was ex-military and started shooting at the police officers, and the police killed him. I mean, it was very clear, black and white of, this
Yes.
person was in a gunfight. Can you remind us what happened in terms of that process, in terms of DA action, administrative review? Because
I don't know that I believe that was May of 2020. And I'm looking at the chief, I believe that was May of 2020, and I don't believe that the DA has even come back on that one.
That is correct. We have not received the DA's letter. So the administrative review has not been done on that case.
So, I know we're here to ask questions, but I feel like there is a spectrum of outcomes, and I'm no expert in these things, but it's hard to imagine that that type of scenario was not justified. And, it feels not like, we're doing no one any service leaving this administrative matter open when I believe our police officers were, had every right and responsibility to protect the public and against a dangerous assailant who was actively, shooting at police officers. So, which is different than, I'm going to go to the Long Beach scenario where that council took action, or I think it was actually the school body, the school board.
School district, yes.
Took that because it was, very much something that they didn't feel like they needed to wait. I feel like we have taken a position that we always wait. And my feeling is that there's kind of extremes where we're not doing the officer or the public any service. If there's some question, and maybe that's true in the specific matter, then we do want to wait. So I'm just, laying out maybe a pathway to some guidance here, where right now we always wait, which I'm not sure is, that's a very universal standard. And when the officers and the public are waiting for rendering, we have two scenarios that I just mentioned where the outcome was pretty clear and action was taken. So I leave that more as a thought for my colleagues, and maybe be helpful to the chief in terms of parsing through how to handle some of these situations.
Vice Mayor Wilson, let me just clarify. You're not suggesting that the council take action. In Long Beach, it was the school board who took action. Of course, school boards are governed by the California Education Code. They actually handle discipline directly, unlike us. What you're suggesting is that the police chief and the police department
We provide guidance. I think we're able to provide guidance, is what I understood. So we can provide guidance where, to the chief, that we think it's appropriate, where there's little ambiguity that the actions were appropriate and that they complete the administrative review, not dependent upon the DA, where, I don't know, I think it's pretty clear that in the case of, the scenario where the active shooter was firing at our police officers, that was certainly justified. In other cases where it's not obvious, and maybe we think it was clearly a heinous act, and it was maybe bad judgment that the police chief not be subject to waiting. Right now, the gating factor is the DA. That's what I'm hearing all the time. The DA, it's 1 year, 3 year, 4 year, and I feel like the DA's opinion is super important, maybe where there's some ambiguity. So I'm going to that area where we're able to, I think it was Siobhan's statement on page 3, inquire of the manager or provide some guidance to the manager of how they may address certain situations. So that's kind of food for thought, maybe for a little later in the conversation.
Thank you, Councilmember, Vice Mayor Wilson. We don't always wait for the clearance letter, but in this particular situation, like you said, there was no ambiguity, so there was no rush to settle this. There was no outcry from the officers or from the families or anything like that. So in this particular instance, we just went by our standard past practice, which is to wait. But again, that's open for discussion if that's what the city manager wants to do.
Yeah, so, I think that it seems like we always wait is what I thought I heard.
We do, for the most part, we wait.
So I'm wondering whether that is very kind of too generic, and whether there's some sort of different scenarios that should be handled and maybe without waiting or waiting and so on and so forth. So, I think I want to get through my questions. We can pick that up a little later.
Okay, go ahead and proceed. Or the city manager, I think, had a comment.
No, I would just say that I understand what you're saying, Vice Mayor. We'll look at that. I don't know how many are pending, but certainly we have no objection to going back and saying, are we waiting on too many? And the chief and I'll talk and see what are the pros and cons of not changing that.
Thank you. Mr. Kennedy?
I want to thank Councilmember Hampton for his doggedness in making sure that we have a discussion at the city council level about these issues. And certainly there's a lot of angst and interest in the community of just really understanding what are the metes and bounds, what the council, city attorney, city managers, city police chief must operate under. And hopefully this discussion will give greater clarity, even if it does not find the satisfaction that members of the community would like. Before I get started with my comments, I'd like to know, as it relates to the officer involved in shooting that took place on Adena, was there a DA clearance letter on that particular shooting? That shooting would have taken place within the last 3 years, where our officers were in pursuit and were fired.
That was at Los Robles at Adena.
Correct.
The 10, I think it was 1020 block of Los Robles and Adena.
Correct.
Yeah, I do remember that case, and I do believe we received the clearance letter because we looked at that. We did the administrative review of that case. It's been completed.
And since the question was asked related to the officer involved shooting that took place at Allen and the freeway, where our officers were fired upon by former law enforcement, former military personnel who had tremendous amount of ammo in the car and several weapons. Why is it that we have not received a DA clearance letter on that particular matter?
I can't answer why the DA hasn't responded or given us their review, but I do know that we had, of course, several officers there. Our training officer, our training sergeant did review that for training issues. Even though we didn't do a full-on administrative review, we did want to take a look at it just because so many rounds were fired. We didn't do, like you said, we didn't do the official review, but we did take a look at the training and the tactics involved in that situation.
And this is Michelle Bonaris. Oh, I was just going to note, as the interim chief mentioned, I don't know why. We do understand that there are many files in the DA's office that they are looking at and researching and spending a lot of time on. So it's not just Pasadena, it is many, it involves all the jurisdictions in the county, all the 88 cities and law enforcement agencies. And I would also note that while staff here may recall what happened with a particular instance, I note that we're discussing it as a policy, or the policies and the general procedures that are followed. Staff may not have at the top of their head a particular result in a particular matter, as we're trying to look at that broader base, the policies and the procedures. Thank you.
Okay, then I'll stick to a different line of questioning. Did Pasadena Police Department finish an internal administrative investigation on the particular shooting that Vice Mayor Wilson raised?
So if that's the Allen and Corson shooting, no, we did not do, we did not do an official administrative review, but again, we looked at we looked at the tactics and training as a result, but not officially.
Okay. In your research, Javon, did you find any city in the county of Los Angeles that rendered an administrative review without the district attorney coming back with its findings first?
Councilmember Kennedy, I think
Not including educational, not including jurisdictions that are governed under the educational code of the state of California.
And Councilmember Kennedy, I think you're asking is, do other cities have a practice of rendering in X amount of time regardless of whether the district attorney's office has come back or not? Something like
So I'm specifically asking, in your research, did you find any example where a jurisdiction, meaning a police agency?
Councilmember Kennedy, I think actually, without getting into specifics, Pasadena PD has done that in specific instances where warranted. It would be personnel matters, so we can't talk about them individually here. But there have been instances in Pasadena, I believe, where they have come back without a finding on a personnel front. Lieutenant Gordon did poll some other agencies just as a general proposition. Do they accelerate their reviews or not? And I guess Lieutenant Gordon might be able to give a little explanation on her findings.
I did. I spoke to at least 5 different agencies, and all which told all of their cases until they received a letter from the district attorney's office.
If I may add to Councilmember Kennedy, I checked with the COPS office, and they're saying that some agency place time limits on their investigations, but such restrictions can potentially impose an obstacle to completion of a full and accurate investigation.
Okay. Does the city of Pasadena, meaning the Pasadena Police Department, have the latitude to complete an internal administrative review of an officer-involved shooting prior to the district attorney rendering a letter, and at the same time keep that administrative review open for additional findings of fact based upon whatever is provided by the district attorney?
So, Councilmember Kennedy, that goes towards the issue of the Peace Officer Bill of Rights. The bottom line is there's nothing preventing the department from completing the review early in terms of within the policy. However, the challenge is if something later comes in, it would be difficult for the department to say, we just discovered it, if the department knows another entity is already looking at it. So from an employment standpoint, once the department renders, they've rendered, and that's kind of the challenge for chiefs, in the sense of how do they wait till they get everything important, but also, like Councilmember Rivas mentioned, at some point too long could be too long. But truly the problem is that the department can't render subject to more information coming in from an investigation that's known to be pending, because an officer might argue the department knew that investigation was pending and they could have awaited the completion of that investigation, which if it were looked at by the DA, it would have either a clearance letter or B, criminal charges, which would further inform the department.
Mr. Kennedy, the distinction that Mr. Rad is drawing is once an agency acts, and if the statute is not told, we take that action within a year. And then, it's one thing if it's a new incident versus information that maybe our investigation, because we rushed it, did not uncover or fail to uncover, that was in the hands of another agency possibly. But once the police department has acted, the statute then is perfected, if you will. And we would be hard pressed to come back unless, again, it's a new incident involving the same facts and circumstances. But otherwise, we will have been determined, the officer will argue, to have acted. And that creates a very difficult situation for the police chief and the police department and the city.
And then as it relates to rulemaking, I think I'm very clear about the process that was outlined by the deputy chief attorney and also, or chief deputy attorney, hope I get it right, one or the other, and Lieutenant Gordon and our interim police chief. But does the city manager have the authority to review actual policy in the police department and make recommendations to the police chief in his or her rulemaking capacity, meaning standard operating or SOPs or some special orders or executive orders that exist and are promulgated from the police chief directly?
Councilmember Kennedy, I'm not aware of anything in the charter that would prevent that type of dialogue and instruction from the manager.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. We have a number of, oh, are you finished, Mr. Kennedy? Yeah, we have a number of public commenters, but before we turn to public comment, let's turn to Mr. Hampton.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, everyone, and thank you to my colleagues for some thoughtful questions as it comes to this. I have a question, and I may have asked this question at public safety, so I apologize if you guys are going to repeat it. Are Pasadena police officers employees of the city of Pasadena?
Councilmember Hampton, yes.
Okay. The city manager is ultimately in charge of pretty much all city employees outside of the city attorney's office and the city clerk's office.
Yes.
And as you mentioned to Councilmember Kennedy in his last questioning, the city manager would have in any department the say or discussions about employment matters with any of their direct reports.
With their direct reports, yes, but as the system is set up in Pasadena, the department heads deal with their own individual departments. So to your question, just as to department heads, yes.
Yeah, but if the city manager suggested that the police department needs to, or not a police department, but water and power or any department needs to do a thorough investigation of a employee, that would have to happen, correct? I mean,
That would be something I think the department heads may wish to certainly consider.
They may wish to consider, or you
that would be something that it would happen, Councilmember Hampton.
Okay, so that's where my question is going. So as a policy discussion, and this is, for any city employee, right? Let me ask you this question, or to the city manager, or whoever wants to answer the question. Do city employees have to be considered criminals to be fired?
No, there are times when there are other actions that are severe enough. I think what I'd like to add, though, is that the city manager, at least in my mind, should not pull out individuals and say there should be an investigation on them. The city manager should set her own or his own policy, what actions would require that someone in a department be investigated. We're very, very careful to not have human resources policies that apply based on the person. It can become very discriminatory. We have policies based on what people do, and anyone who is in that class that does that behavior those are not probably the best words, but that it applies to everyone. So I can't imagine any city manager saying, I want you to investigate John.
Right,
The
okay,
city
thank
manager
you
would
for
say,
that.
if anyone doesn't show up to work for a week, I want you to investigate all of those people that take that action.
Right, okay, that's fair. I appreciate that. I didn't mean to, say that you're pointing out individual employees, but I did just want to, let or get some idea of if you had that authority, which I know that you do. So I just wanted it to be in the public record because I don't think at public safety this question was asked previously. I did ask the question of the previous city manager: have employees been fired without a criminal investigation? And the answer was yes. So it goes back to my original question: are police officers employees of the city of Pasadena? I think we should treat them like employees of the city of Pasadena and not some like there's some extra work that we need to do. If there's personal investigations that need to be complete for us to know if this person should be in our employee in general, then those should be done in a timely fashion. I think that waiting is not ideal. It's not really not good for any employee, and it's not good for the public as well. So, and it brings me to the December meeting of. Can you guys hear me? I'm sorry. I don't know if I just broke out. Okay. It brings me to the December meeting of the police officers. The oversight committee. As our IPA who just took a job somewhere else, actually in Seattle, and he lived in Seattle. As he was exiting, he said that he didn't think that waiting, and this was the meeting in December, he did not think that waiting was in the best interest of the police officer or the public. This is our own IPA that was previously hired. Of course, we'll be looking for a new IPA, and I'm sure that IPA may come up with the same, may or may not come up with the same findings, but I just thought that was interesting that our police department, in most of these cases, we wait for the DA to render before we do our job, not the DA's job, but because these are City of Pasadena employees, that we do our piece of it prior to anything that the DA has to do. Because if our officers or any city employee is out of policy, I don't think it is in the best interest of the city or that employee to leave them on in employment while we're waiting for the DA to figure out if this person is a criminal or not. And let me ask this question, Javon. So let's say we clear someone and say that, oh, you're up to policy, you're fine. And the DA turns around and says, we're going to file criminal charges on them. What would happen? Would the city have the right to say, okay, well, you have criminal charges filed on you. We may have to, or I'm sorry, let me take that back, not just filed on you, but you have been charged criminally. Are you telling me that now we can no longer say that we have to let this employee go, or will they spend time in jail as they are still in our employ?
Councilmember Hamilton, I think, oh, I'm sorry.
I was just asking, does that question make sense? I'm just saying,
Your question makes sense, and I believe
okay.
I believe I can answer it. So what Lieutenant Gordon talked about is when there's an officer involved shooting, the DA's office comes out the night of the shooting. So it's known to the department that there's going to be a criminal investigation that will reach the DA's office after detectives complete their investigation. So if a DA's office later comes out and files charges relating to that shooting, it's a known fact that the DA is either going to clear the officer or file charges. And I think different council members have brought up different instances where there may be perhaps a greater likelihood of clearance or greater likelihood of charges being filed. But the bottom line is it's known from the night of the shooting that the DA's office is investigating. So if the department chooses to clear the officer, then it's done and completed, and it's not something that could be held open. So it's known, so it's not like something's newly discovered that the DA was looking into it. They were there the night of the shooting to get whatever intel they could just with boots on the ground, and then when they get the product from detectives, they work it up. I get the council's concern that it may take some time, but the bottom line is that it being known to the department to render and clear the officer, and then if their charges are filed, then that's where the department's hands are tied, and that's sort of the one of the concerns with accelerating review just as a matter of course.
Well, my concern with that is, are these?
And I'm sorry, Councilmember Hampton, I think the chief had something to add as well.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Hampton, to cut you off, but just to piggyback on Javon's answer, there are policies that regulate if someone gets arrested. So if an officer gets arrested for a misdemeanor or a felony, that's a whole different category. So if the DA comes forward and says we're going to press charges, then that's a different allegation for us.
Or if they're incarcerated and can't report to work, that becomes a different allegation.
Correct.
If they are prosecuted, found guilty of a felony, then they can no longer, or certain misdemeanors, then they can no longer be an officer because they can't carry a weapon. Right. And so,
well, I appreciate it.
Yeah, different charges.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Chief and Javon, for answering those questions. I appreciate those answers to the question, because that makes the point that I'm trying to make, is that there are employees, they are our city employees, and that we have policies in place, and we don't need to wait for the DA to clear a person to see if they should be in our employ. I mean, you guys have just argued the point that even if we cleared someone later down the road, and 4 years later the DA comes back and says, "Oh no, we're just going to charge them criminally in this case," then we can then terminate, or whatever the police department decides is in the best interest of their department in the city. So back to the point is, we need to finish our investment. And this is the policy discussion that I'm talking about. So we should have a policy, not for just officers, but any employees, that we should finish our personnel investigations within 6 to 9 months. It shouldn't take any longer. I mean, it's like, in this case, we're talking about in the officer's case, there's video evidence in most cases you can look at and see, okay, is this up to our standards? Is this our is this the proper training, et cetera? You can go down the list and figure out, okay, we should clear this officer or not. Just like the police chief cleared the officers a year later. I don't even know if those, let me ask you, a year later or two, it might have been 2 years later, for the officers that were involved in the Christopher Blue matter.
If I may add,
because you made a statement, I'm only bringing this out because there was a statement made about that.
I understand. And then, the administrative investigations is to look at policy and procedure violations, training issues. So it too depends on the violation. It depends on the policy violation and the egregiousness of it to determine whether or not that employee will be terminated. So that's why an investigation is done into the policy violations side of the house.
I appreciate that. The word egregious is an interesting word. Choice. Do you think it's egregious to shoot someone in the back as they run down the street?
No, sir, I don't believe that. I do look at the circumstances of each situation.
I'm just saying, you use the word egregious. I'm just asking the question. I don't know what is egregious enough for any employee, right, to be given a proper administrative review. I don't know why we're waiting. We're waiting for the DA. Maybe the question is, maybe we should have, maybe we should request the DA come to us and talk about employment.
That's
matters.
on my list of things coming out of this meeting is to ask the police chief to work with the other police chiefs and other city councils to persuade the DA that they need to move quicker, dedicate more resources.
Mayor, just a point of order. Could we please, the chief was in the middle of answering a question and she was cut off. And I don't know if she completed her answer or not, but if we're gonna ask questions, we should hear the full answer.
I just wanted to add the one thing, Mr. Hampton, that someone shooting someone feloniously in the back, that's a crime. That goes beyond a policy violation. That person, that's what the DA determines. Is this a felony or not? Is this a felonious act? It's well beyond a policy violation. That's the only thing I wanted to add.
Oh, thank you. I guess the question is, if you witnessed an officer in a video, et cetera, or a city employee, this is even to the city manager who can answer this question, doing something that is egregious, would we finish a personnel investigation or would we wait for the DA to let us know if that person was a criminal or not? In any case,
about an armed suspect who fails to comply, or
no, I'm just saying, let's say a traffic driver gets out of his truck. It's on video because traffic drivers have videos on their trucks, and beats up a resident. Is that egregious enough to say, you know what, we got to terminate this traffic driver? Or do we have to wait for the DA and let the traffic driver continue his job until we figure out if he's going to be filed with criminal charges or not?
but wouldn't we want to investigate all of the facts?
I mean, if a traffic driver gets out of his car and beats up a citizen, I'm not asking you, Councilman Madison, I'm asking the city manager. Because remember, we don't have the ability to fire or hire you. So to the city manager, if a traffic driver got out of his truck and just beat down a citizen for no apparent reason, would you think we would have to wait for the DA to render criminal charges on this traffic driver before you make a determination if this traffic driver should be terminated or not?
I would think we would need to go through the process of what happened and review it. And if there was tapes, review that. With a truck driver, there are MOUs and other things that would be looked at. I think that we would have much more control over that because I don't think we need to wait for a third party. And we would come to a conclusion that most likely would be to fire the truck driver. But I suppose we could say that the person pulled a gun and shot the truck driver's tires out. Then when we were done with the investigation, he was terrified or she was terrified. I don't know. There's a process regardless. I don't like this process that has to do with police involved shooting. It is possibly by design this complex because we give people guns to do their work, and it gets really complex when they have to use those guns in enforcement. And so, as I think the city attorney and the deputy city attorney have said so clearly, we ask for outside guidance in this case, and that's the process we've picked. And I'm probably rambling now. In any case, regardless of how obvious it might be, there would be a process that would be involved that we would go through before we would do any firing of any employee that works for the city of Pasadena.
Even in the scenario that you highlight, Mr. Hampton, the city manager.
This is all hypothetical. We don't have to.
Yeah,
go down
the city manager would not have the authority to step in and fire someone. They would, that individual that it's the department head who would conduct an investigation and then under the law provide them with pre-disciplinary opportunity to be heard and give their side of the story. At that point,
I've
if
got
the employee, yeah, if the employee
Mayor,
disagrees,
I've got two more questions.
then they can
Mayor,
appeal it to the city manager. That's
I
the point where
appreciate
we're
your
arrive.
Mayor, I appreciate you answering, but at the end of the day, we have no peer view over employment matters. So I think my answers should only be coming from the city manager and staff. I do appreciate you chiming in though, Mayor. Thank you. In the embezzlement case, did we wait for the embezzler to be convicted before we fired him, or did we leave him on payroll?
Councilmember Hampton, this is Javon. I believe Danny Wooten had left employment of the city several months before he was charged, and I think he had left for reasons unrelated to the embezzlement.
Okay. And then the police chief, I have to ask just my final question. If an officer, this is just a hypothetical, if an officer was drunk and fled from, I guess, what is it called? Another officer trying to arrest him while off duty, officer being off duty, Pasadena police officer being off duty, fled from another officer, would that officer, would that be cause for firing if the officer was drunk driving or and then ran from a police officer?
I think it's like the city manager said and what the attorneys are saying. All of the facts, you have to look at all the facts of the case.
No, I'm asking a question. In your, is that part of, if I'm a police officer, right,
Mm-hmm.
and I was drunk driving, and I get pulled over by another law enforcement agency, and I jump out of my car and I run, would you say that that person should be employed by the city of Pasadena?
I want to say on face
Or would you
value,
say that they,
on face value, it's a crime, just based on what you're saying.
okay,
And there are policies that dictate criminal activity, but not all, unfortunately, are terminations.
okay, but you said that that is a crime.
It is a crime to run from a police officer, yes.
Okay. And if I'm a police officer who runs from a police officer, would you say that because that is a crime, do we keep officers employed that have committed crimes? That's actually a great question. Do we keep officers employed in Pasadena that have committed crimes?
It depends on the totality of the situation. There are people that have, we've had people that have been involved in criminal activity that didn't result in termination. And it was based on the totality of the circumstances. And they went through the criminal justice system as well.
Well, those are just my questions. Ultimately, it comes down to the city manager, and the city manager could say, based on a policy, that we should move forward with any investigation of an employee within 6 to 9 months, if the city manager so chooses to do so. As a policymaker and as someone who evaluates city manager, I think that this should be a part of the city manager's evaluation when it comes to employment of our managing their job and managing their employees. And so I think that that should be looked at as a council as a whole. We should look at, hey, are we doing these things in the best interest of the city, the community, actually community first, the city, and then public safety. So I thank everybody for giving me this extra time to ask these questions. But I think at the end of the day, we need to not wait, and we need to do our job and do our investigation, because these are our policies and our procedures, not the DA's.
When you say ours, you mean the city staff,
The city of Pasadena, I'm sorry.
not the city council. Yeah.
Not meaning me, Tyrone Hampton.
Yeah.
I'm saying the city of Pasadena.
I want to make sure we have a clear record for those listening to the public. You're not suggesting the city council can or should take these matters up directly. Okay. see, Mr. Madison, followed by Vice Mayor Wilson.
Thanks, Mayor. I think this discussion, hopefully has revealed that, there is a very complex overlay of numerous legal processes that unfold when we have an officer-involved shooting. And my view is the staff has presented really an eminently reasonable approach to balance all of the competing interests here. The desire to make the right decision, not just a quick decision, the legal rights of all of the stakeholders. And it's certainly not a perfect system. And I for one, if I think it would be, the DA would be more expeditious in a thorough, comprehensive review of all of the evidence. And I agree with whoever it was that said that we should all want that. Again, not a sort of a slipshod, hurry up job, but a comprehensive, thorough review, putting enough resources into the matter to do a thorough, comprehensive review. But again, if one looks at this 5 or 6 or 8 different legal tracks, criminal investigation of the underlying offense that may have led to the police contact, potential criminal investigation by the DA, by a police department, the internal affairs employment, of potential federal investigation, civil litigation brought by the individual that was involved or his or her family members. And they each have different rules that are legal in nature. This just isn't something that we can say, I want it right now. So I think staff balances all those interests well, and it's a good discussion to have from time to time. But I don't see us making any meaningful change to any policy, and I understand that that's frustrating in certain cases. But I think the importance for all involved of getting this right outweighs, the need to get it quick. Thank you, Mayor.
Be quick, but don't hurry, as John Wooden would say.
Coach Wooden, one of my favorites. Yep.
We have over 23 cards submitted. Mr. Wilson, Vice Mayor Wilson's next.
I have 2 quick clarification questions based off Councilmember Hampton's questioning. I just want to clarify one thing. I'm not in public safety, so this is first time review for some of us. And I think it's super important that we understand what's happening here. The public understand it. So obviously we heard hundreds and hundreds of comments over the months and months. So it's a bit tedious at times. Is the DA's review looking for criminal violations only, or does it look at any policy aspects as well? Is it kind of, did they break the law, or did they comply with our policy? Can someone answer that question so I understand the nature of the review?
Sure, Councilmember Rolson, this is Javon. The District Attorney's Office looks at whether the shooting was justified under California law, and the penal code section that the DA's office would look at would be was actually something that was amended within the last couple of years as well. But the bottom line is, it's to just answer, was it justified? Did the officer commit a crime? That's the question the DA looks at. If it's a no, a clearance letter issues. If it's a yes, criminal charges would follow. The department independently looks at whether the officer followed policy, Pasadena Police Department policies. The DA would not necessarily look to policies to see whether the penal code standard was met. So they're really 2 separate reviews looking at 2 separate things. Now, with that being said, some of the verbiage, some of the discussion, and some of the interpretations may be similar and might overlap, which is certainly why the department can benefit. And the other point I would make is the department's use of force policy is something that at a minimum has to meet the 4th Amendment, but the department can aspire to further than that and place more more instructions on officers than even the Fourth Amendment might allow, might limit. So really, what the department looks at in terms of policy might be something where they look at even what might be a higher standard than the DA's office might look at.
Is it possible that an officer could be within policy and then be charged criminally? Is that even possible?
It's conceivably possible, but that's kind of one of the reasons why it, in all other things being equal, a department might benefit from seeing what the DA's office does in terms of charging the officer and what evidence they might have that really informs their charging the officer, so that the department can do its best job in rendering on whether the officer acted within policy. So your hypothetical is certainly possible, but that is a reason, that sort of possibility is why the department would certainly want to wait to see what the DA's office does, generally speaking. But again, there's no policy that says they have to. There's nothing that says they don't.
Once again, when we asked the question, I'll ask the chief. Is it possible that an officer can be within the city policies and procedures, but also at the same time be criminally charged? I mean, is that even possible?
I think it's like Javon said, it's possible, but you know, the DA also looks at practices. So they may find something wrong with our training standards or the practices in which we used to train these officers on this officer involved shooting, but it may not be unlawful.
Okay, so that's a different answer than Javon gave, because I asked whether they look at this only from a criminal lens versus a policy and practice lens, and you're telling me that they actually do review the policy and practices.
Well, they do review them, and they may review them and say, you need to work on this, or this is not the best practice on how you train officers on officer involved shootings, or you may need to change your policy to this standard. So many times the clearance letters will give recommendations.
Okay, so it's not limited, did the person break the law and should they be charged? It's a more comprehensive review of policies and practices.
That's correct.
Because I was hearing from Javon that there was a separate, they got kind of bifurcated, and if that's true, then you can, move these kind of reviews independently. But if they're inextricably linked, and the DA is actually doing a kind of a second review of policies and practices, then I think it's more challenging to move independently, if that's what I'm hearing.
Yes, the DA does look at the totality of the situation. They may say it's within policy, or it's not in policy, but it's not illegal. You know what I'm saying? Like you don't have the best practice with what you're training the officers, and you need to look at your training.
Okay, I was under the impression it was looking for criminal violation only, but it sounds like it's more comprehensive than that.
It's very comprehensive.
Thank you very much.
Okay, that completes the first round. Let's turn to public comment.
Okay.
To be fair to people, we're gonna try and get as many people in as we can. We have over 23. Go ahead.
So Hiram Cormier Jr., followed by Alan Shea, followed by Kat Ross. And it's 1 minute and 30 seconds. I'll ring the bell at 30 seconds.
Again, go ahead and show your lack of humanity to the world. I heard several times throughout the whole presentation the words egregious and severe. Is it not severe enough to be shot in your back and have a bullet pass through your fucking chest and hit a house on the other side of the street? That's not severe? If you can't answer that question, answer this. Would you like to be shot in your back? Would you? No, you would not. That shit is severe. I don't want to hear that old bullshit, all the excuses y'all making. Why are police more protected than average fucking citizens? You had a gun ring. There have been multiple people who have been shot by police. It's not severe. Tell that to all those lifers from Pasadena, nigga. Tell that to all the people suffering from this shit. I'm gonna tell you this. It's as simple as this. Fire Edwin Dumagwendon and the cops who killed Anthony McClain. Do you understand me? Fuck Edwin Dumagwendon, nigga. Do you understand?
Mayor,
that?
the point of order, the speakers, you've been using hate speech several times.
You are a fucking dumbass, my nigga.
Mr. Cormier.
Fuck you, boy. What's up, homie?
Okay.
Am I still on or what? Yeah, like I said, you need to fire those cops I don't care what you say. Black people do not deserve to die. There is not enough water in this world to wash the blood off your hands, boy. Understand me when I tell you that shit, homie. I'm on your ass. And believe me, when them elections come around, all you niggas getting bodied. The same way we did to Morel.
Your time has
the same way we did to
expired.
Perez.
Thank you,
Y'all
Mr.
gonna
Cormier.
fucking lose this
Thank
shit.
you.
Fuck y'all.
Alan Shea, followed by Kat Ross, followed by Jane Ward. Mr. Shea has fallen off. Kat Ross has fallen off as well. Okay. No, she is here. Okay. Okay, Kat,
Ms. Ross?
Ms. Ross, go ahead. You have 1 minute and 30 seconds. Go ahead.
It would be a tragic missed opportunity if the momentum from this conversation does not lead to an action to make necessary policy changes. As such, the council should inquire with the city manager about whether the PPD believes the officers in the McCain case broke department policy. Police accountability is needed, especially when OIS incidents occur, and city council should make inquiries into administrative matters so that the city manager can demonstrate how PPD is being held accountable. Secondly, instruct the city manager to change the OIS policy to ensure that the administrative review includes a thorough investigation, including the administrative team interviewing all of the officers at the scene within 1 month of the incident. PPD has said that during the administrative review, interviews with officers are sometimes given only during criminal investigations. That's against best practice according to the International Association of Chiefs of Police in their OIS guide. All officers should be compelled to answer questions with the administrative review, with the two investigations staying strictly separate. According to the IACP, it's imperative the administrative review gets to the truth of what happened so the officers' actions can be reviewed and also so that policy can be reviewed. The case-by-case policy proposed by the city attorney infers that the PPD investigations are not thorough enough to match the investigation done by the DA. It's infuriating to think that the DA is so much better equipped to investigate that they will find a wholly different outcome. Certainly, policy could
Ms.
be
Ross,
created
your
to
time has
beef up the
expired.
investigation parameters to increase the efficacy of the investigation so that they can be trusted as thorough and complete.
Thank you, Ms. Ross.
Thank you. Jane Ward, followed by Holden Denham, who appears to not be in the meeting, followed by Heavenly Hughes. Ms. Ward, go ahead. 1 minute, 30 seconds.
City council members instruct and guide the city manager to change the officer-involved shooting policy so that the city has a 9-month deadline for administrative review. This is your role to instruct the city manager in all matters of policy per the presentation that we just heard. This is what the community is asking for. Timely review of the conduct of employees who kill city residents is not just common sense, it is also an important part of the process of updating the OIS policy so as to prevent future deaths. If the policies followed by officers are leading to the deaths of community members, then they are bad policies, and council members should instruct staff to review and change procedures to make Pasadena safe for all community members. If, on the other hand, the policies in place are sufficient, but the officer broke policy, the officer should be notified in a timely manner so that they do not kill another community member, and so that other officers also know what they can expect should they shoot and kill a resident. The council's job is to instruct the city manager on all matters of policy. Please agendize an action to instruct the city manager to change the officer-involved shooting policy. Say his name, Anthony McLean.
Thank you. Heavenly Hughes, followed by Victor Hodson, followed by Sarah Brewer Boland. 1 minute, 30 seconds, Heavenly.
Ms. Hughes?
Thank you, Council Member Tyrone Hampton, for consistently and persistently making a point that officers involved shootings need to have immediate action, a policy in place. One thing that City Council Member Hampton said at this meeting, just like this meeting. It's almost like this meeting is mirroring the meeting we had back in October. Council member Tyrone Hampton said, too many words happening. We're hearing it again. A whole lot of words happening and no action. This is another outcry from the community on the behalf of the family to take action in the murder of Anthony McClain. The egregious murder of Anthony McClain didn't render an immediate disciplinary action by the mayor, the city, or the chief. Yes, Jess Reeves, this is overwhelmingly frustrating to watch for years police officers get away with murder. Mayor Victor Gordo, the reason why I said to call me is before you became mayor, you spoke on the importance of what the city should project. Right now, you all are projecting police violence, and the murder of Anthony McClain does not matter to you.
Thank you, Ms. Hughes. Victor Hodgson, followed by Sarah Brewer Bolin, followed by Chris Cohen. Mr. Hodgson?
Yes, okay.
Go ahead.
Yes, this is Victor Hodgson, one of the founders of My Tribe Rise. We're a peace movement. Reviewing the conduct of employees who kill someone in a timely manner is not just common sense. It is an important policy decision to prevent future incidents. If the policies followed by the officers are inadequate and are leading to the death of community members, then the policy should be reviewed and changed to make the procedures safer for all community members. If the policies in place are sufficient, but the officer broke policy, the officer should be notified in a timely manner so that their behavior does not continue nor spread to other officers who look up to them. The council job is to instruct the city manager on policy, agendize an action to instruct the city manager to change the officer involved shooting policy. We have to do better. I yield my time.
Thank you. Sarah Brewer Bolin, followed by Chris Cohen, followed by Michael Williams, followed by Brittany Pollock. Ms. Bolin, go ahead.
Policy changes will save lives. What I've heard you say tonight is that council may instruct city manager in all manner of policy, and you provide guidance to the chief. I hope you are hearing that the community wants PPD to stop shooting Black people and to be held accountable and taken off the streets when they do. The community is clearly demanding to instruct the city manager to revise the OIS policy. PPD must stop shooting fleeing suspects in the back. If this policy had been changed 8 years ago, after the unjust murder of Kendrick McDade, Anthony McClain would be alive and with his children right now. Again, the community wants to live. Black people in Pasadena have the right to not be shot in the back when fleeing. So tell the city manager and the police chief to change the policy. Listen to the community, because the community lives with the consequences. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Cohen, followed by Michael Williams, followed by Brittany Pollock. Julia R. would be next, but she's not in the meeting.
Yeah, hi, this is Chris Cohen. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Yeah, I understand the limits of the council's power regarding the city manager, but as you, Vice Mayor Wilson, said earlier in this call, you're supposed to be supplying guidance to the city manager to council. So I'm asking you to make a motion to agendize a change to the officer-involved shooting policy. Please change the length of the administrative review period to conclude within 9 months of the incident. 9 months is the amount of time that Police Chief Perez said is the outer limit of time needed by his staff to conduct a thorough investigation. So it shouldn't be taking 3, 4, or 5 years. Our own police chief says it can be done in 9. So our community needs police accountability, and we're not getting it. So we're asking you to make a motion, second the motion, agendize an action item. Please instruct the city manager to change the officer-involved shooting policy. It seems like you guys wait because you're scared that you'll find a different result than the DA. Like Heavenly said, we want immediate action when our community members are murdered by police. We want justice and we're not getting it. Thanks.
Thank you. Michael Williams, followed by Brittany Pollock, followed by Julia R., who's not in the meeting, followed by Carolyn Galoni. Mr. Williams, 1 minute, 30 seconds. Go ahead.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
I think it's always interesting how this commission likes to spin around, or council likes to spin around what the public is asking. The public is not asking for the council to fire directors. What we're asking you is to hold accountable the officers. You are in charge and have purview over the city manager, who is the city manager, and whether that city manager can keep their job or not. You have the ability to recommend things to the city manager. But we're asking you as a whole body, including the city manager, including the police chief of police, and including every single council member on the board, is to fire the officers that killed Anthony McLean, period. That is what we are asking of you. So stop this foolishness about you don't have the ability or the power to do whatever. You can make it happen. You make other things happen. You do other things that the community doesn't want. You commission other folks, hire people that you want. You have a review board to hire the next city manager. You all can do it if you want to, but it's clear that you don't. It's clear that you do not want to fire.
Mr. Williams, your time has expired.
You would lose out on your sweet union money. Fire the officers that killed Anthony McLean.
We'll call Brittany Pollock,
as a full
followed by
body.
Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Julia R., who's not in the meeting, followed by Carolyn Galoni. Ms. Pollock, go
Can you all hear
ahead.
me?
Yes, go ahead.
I'm calling, like others, to demand the firing of all the Pasadena police officers who played a part in the murder of Anthony McLean over a year ago in August of 2020. Demand accountability. I want to ask you all to imagine something with me. I'm a teacher in the county. Imagine if myself or any other teacher or public servant were to murder one of our students in public, in front of many people, on video, in fact, murdering them while they run away. It would be absolutely insane to imagine myself continuing on the job, let alone not being criminally prosecuted, and in fact being protected by the city. The people who murder and steal the lives of human beings, our community members, need to be held accountable. This is not a lot to ask. Like, this is the bare minimum. It's so embarrassing that you all won't even fire the officers. What the hell are you thinking? There are legitimate murderers roaming the streets of Pasadena who are being paid by the city to live their best lives. You are obsessed with words and jargon, creating an entire presentation to talk about things you can and cannot do while you never actually do anything. You use words like officer-involved shooting and in-custody deaths. These are murdered people.
Ms. Pollock, your time has
You are
expired.
completely dehumanizing human beings. This is
Julia
destroying
R.
you.
is not in the meeting,
Reflect
so
on
we'll
how
move to Carolyn Galoni, followed by Julie Martinez.
Hi.
Hi, Carolyn. Go
I
ahead.
just wanted to say that, yes, clearly these callers all have it correct, right? I mean, you need to change the OIS policy. You need to stop talking about it as incidents. I totally agree. These are murders. Don't let murderers walk the street. We have way too many of these incidents, these murders in Pasadena, anywhere. One is way too many, but we have at least 4. And don't let this opportunity pass you to change Pasadena's policies that are so clearly allow the police to go ahead and murder or do their jobs, we'll call it, with absolutely no consequences. I also think that making plans for review, like we're doing today, of iOS incidents is pretty much admitting that more incidents will happen And they will, because the police are never fired. They're never prosecuted. You guys are doing nothing. Why wouldn't this continue? Let's keep making plans for what we're going to do when the next one comes up. Of course, the next murder comes up, we're saying there's going to be one because we didn't change anything. And yes, you do all have power. You 100% do. You can change charters. You can hire a city manager who questions police and opposes police unions and has pushed for quick investigation prosecution board. You can stop approving all the frickin' money that PPD asked for. You guys say yes to everything, no matter how much the community demands that you say no. It's yes, 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 yes. I mean, check your record. It's ridiculous. And shrink their budget. Stop giving them more
Ms. Galoni, your time has expired.
creative.
We're gonna move
Make
on
a
to
public
Julie
statement. Make a public statement
Martinez,
against these murders.
followed by Jasmine Richards Abdullah, followed by Pastor Kerwin Manning. Ms. Martinez?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead. 1 minute, 30
Okay.
seconds. Go ahead.
Thank you for putting this on the agenda. However, several distinctions are necessary to highlight. We need you to join the community, you as our elected leaders, to be outraged that the police chief that you all hired has not fired the police officers who killed Anthony McLean. Justice is needed in our community. These 3 officers must be removed from our community. They pose a severe danger to other community members. I'm a resident of District 7, Pasadena resident. I take this very seriously. Police officers are never hired to be a judge, a jury, and an executioner. It was an egregious crime for these officers to shoot a man in the back. Dangerous place for men of color. California has the most police shootings, and LA County has the most of any county. Another distinction is Black Californians are 3 times more likely to be seriously injured, shot, or killed by police relative to their share of the state's population. It is up to you. It's apparent that you, as an elected body, need to create a policy change because this incident, these murders, clearly have serious consequences for those involved, and they can have far-reaching implications for how communities engage with law enforcement, potentially creating challenges for maintaining public safety. Our community here in Pasadena do not trust the police because it is rooted in
Ms.
systemic
Martinez,
racism.
your time has expired.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jasmine Richards Abdullah, followed by Pastor Kerwin Manning, followed by Yoel Carter Martinez, who has not yet checked into the meeting. Jasmine fell off. Pastor Kerwin Manning. Pastor Manning,
Please
go ahead.
stop killing black. Please stop killing black civilians and residents of Pasadena. In over 20 years of pastoring this city, I've had the unfortunate honor of serving families devastated by the untimely death of their loved ones killed by Pasadena police officers. These African-American men were never given the opportunity to have their day in court and will never be able to say their own names. So we must, Leroy Barnes, Kendrick McDade, Reginald Thomas, and yes, Anthony McLean. They were all civilians, not criminals. They were civilians. Maybe this discussion should be centered around civilian-involved shootings. I say this because since its inception, there has never been a Pasadena police officer killed by a civilian, yet alone a black man. I hope you heard me say never. A PPD officer has never been killed in the line of duty by a civilian. So why has there been so many black men killed by PPD without proper investigation, protocol, arrest, and closure? Because the system is broken. We need our mayor, city manager, and city council members to do whatever it takes to change these horrific outcomes for civilians, especially those who are melanin rich. God bless you.
Thank you. Yoel Carter Martinez is not in the meeting, so we'll go to, oh, she is, okay. And then followed by Sarah, and then Kaveh Nayeni, who has not yet checked into the meeting. Ms. Martinez, go ahead.
Hello. Lack of accountability and transparency after an officer-involved shooting, as you well know, greatly erodes and undermines public trust in police
the council, and the city manager. The council should instruct the city manager to report out to the council and to the community when an officer breaks policy and explain the disciplinary actions taken to show that accountability is taking place. According to California Attorney General Rob Bonta, when an officer-involved shooting occurs, transparent and open communication is critical to maintain public trust. Thank you. I yield my time.
Thank you. Sarah, followed by Kaveh Nayani, who's not checked into the meeting, followed by Karina K. Sarah, go ahead.
If I can hear you.
1 minute and 30 seconds. Go ahead.
Yes, I would like to speak on Pasadena police murdering Reginald J.R. Thomas. He was murdered by the Pasadena police back on September 30th, 2016. His officers are still on the job. They beat, raped, and hog-tied him and murdered him in front of his 5 children, as well as the mother of 6 children, inside their apartment. His body was left in the apartment for 14 hours. His children had to walk around his body as he was kept there. The officers involved. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
The officers involved responsible for the murder of Reginald J.R. Thomas, Jeffrey Newland, Thomas Butler, Robert Griffith, Michael Orozco, Philip Poirier, Rafael Santiago, Aguilar Delpana, Corporal Gomez, Sam, Matthew Griffith, Jeffrey Newland. Not okay that these police get away with murder and traumatized children. This is just not right. I don't know if this is policy to just murder someone and leave their body until they're just going to the family for hours on end like this. It needs to stop. It's been almost 6 years. We're talking about a delay in policy. This is a delay in investigation.
Sarah, your time has expired. Thank you. Kaveh Nayani is not in the meeting, so we'll move on to Karina K, followed by Camille Lewis, who has not yet checked in, followed by Adriana Batista. Karina, go ahead. 1 minute, 30 seconds.
My name is Karina. I'm a Pasadena resident, and I'm a member of Black Lives Matter Los Angeles. And I'm trying not to throw the fuck up on my computer right now after having sat through the same presentation that we sat through in October. I want to highlight the limitations of your current policy that you like to hide behind with all your lawyering and with all your bullshit. The limitations of your processes right now are such that a person can get shot in the back and can be knelt on. I want to ask you, did you guys watch the video? Did you guys watch the video of Anthony McLean being murdered? Okay? Because what it tells me is that the whole conversation that we just fucking sat through doesn't allow for there to be any accountability in what happened to him. So fuck your policies if it does not bring about justice, if it does not prevent a Black man from being shot twice in the fucking back and knelt on. Did you all see it? Did you all see it? And if you did, then you're okay with it. And you should be ashamed of yourself. You should be fucking sick like I am. Those officers need to be fired. You all need to figure out how to bring about accountability in Pasadena, not talk about what the fuck you can't do. We're sick of that shit. We're sick of people dying and you not being able to do anything about it. Figure it the fuck out. We don't want to talk about limitations. Are you kidding me? We've had this conversation already. You just said that you allow criminals to work on the fucking force with taxpayer dollars. You think we're okay with that? No. Figure your fucking shit
Karina,
out.
your time has expired.
Yeah, shut up, Javon, and fuck you for all your shit that you.
We'll move on to Camille Lewis is not in the meeting. We'll move on to Adriana Batista, followed by Kate McInerney. Ms. Batista.
I would like to point out that this lie of the administrative review having to take place after the DA review, that's pure lies that John Perez fed us, and now Chief Moody is feeding us the same lie. We will not stand for that. it's blatant that the OIR group independent investigations and recommendations were never seriously considered by PPD because in Kendrick McDade's case, their recommendation 5 was because in the McDade case, the department failed to conduct an administrative investigation, the department should develop protocols requiring that in every use of deadly force, not just officer involved shootings, but every use of deadly force incident, Pasadena PD should conduct an administrative investigation that, at a minimum, includes follow-up interviews of the involved officers regarding tactical decision-making and collects sufficient additional evidence so that the executive team may identify and assess performance, supervision, and equipment based on an officer's articulated mindset. This report goes on to note that OIR group was not invited to the McDade criminal shooting.
Ms. Batista, your time has expired.
Okay, that's another issue. Why the fuck is this comment only allowed a minute and a half? Like, you can't keep doing this on important issues. Just keep on cutting them down all the time.
We're going to move on to Kate McInerney, followed by Janae Lennox. She's not in the meeting. Janae Lennox. Janae, go ahead. 1 minute, 30 seconds.
So this was an awful presentation. I literally, on the record, you guys exposed a whole lot of bullshit. The fact that you admitted that officers actually done crime are still on the force. That is absurd. You guys need to change policy clearly if you have criminals who can stay on the force. Also, it is absolutely absurd for you guys to try to figure out a way to say that shooting someone unarmed somehow could be justifiable. There is no justifiable shooting of unarmed civilians. There is no justification. There is not going to be anywhere in history where that will be justifiable. So that means that these people need to be immediately fired. So the officers who had murdered Anthony McLean need to be immediately fired. Whatever happens in their criminal record, that's on the DA. But firing, the basic minimum, that is what you guys can do. I heard that in this whack and ridiculous charade that you guys can fire them. So change whatever policies and do what you need to do, but firing people who do outrageous acts. I believe that's what someone said when they said, yeah, if you shoot somebody behind the back, that is outrageous. If you damn skippy it is, that means you need to fucking fire them. This is not hard. This is kind of, the basic minimum of comprehension. If someone is doing criminal activities, they're probably not good for the job, right? Like, if I'm over here doing criminal activities
Ms.
at my
Lennox,
job,
your
you think
time
I'm
has
gonna keep it?
expired.
Probably not.
Thank you.
Fire
Kate McInerney. *6 to unmute, Ms. McInerney. Go ahead.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Rather than justifying, sorry, can you all hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Rather than justifying all the reasons that you supposedly cannot intervene, you all should be finding every way that you can intervene, that you can fire the officers who killed Anthony McLean. If the charter or policy, quote unquote, doesn't allow it, then yes, it is necessary that we change that policy. At the same time, it's important that we not delay on this. The community has waited long enough for justice. So if you can instruct the city manager, then instruct her to fire the cops who killed Anthony McLean. It's that simple. Instruct the city manager to change the policy and change our institutions so that murders like that of Anthony McLean and Kendrick McDade and other Black people do not happen. Once again, community members are giving you the answers. Explaining these supposed limitations over and over again is patronizing and isn't going to cut it. Expanding technology isn't going to cut it. We don't need more technology.
when the footage already shows the brutal anti-blackness that surrounded Anthony McLean's murder? You all said yourself, if it's serious enough, then it is possible to fire these officers now. How can you not see the severity of this? How can you not act on the urgency to get these cops off the street?
Ms.
Fire the
McInerney,
officers who killed
you're,
Anthony McLean. Fire them yesterday.
thank you. The last speaker we have is Kaiv Naeem, coming in as Anna Derby.
Yes. Can
Go
you hear
ahead.
me?
Yes, we can. 1 minute, 30 seconds.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, my name is Kavanaini. I have just one question for you guys. When are you guys gonna start doing your jobs? I mean, this is completely shameless. Honestly, after a year and a half of this, it's shameless. Andy Wilson dared to come here and cry for the officers because they didn't get that no one necessarily they haven't been what? All these officers that you cried about, sir, they haven't missed a check. They've been on the work. You want them to be clear, they have been clear. What is not clear is what the fuck you guys are doing over there when there's a murder still driving on the street. The same person who shot a father, a son, a grandson of the grandmother who died, believing that you guys are not there to give them justice. Shame on you, Andy Wilson. You're disgusting, man. We're going to confront you in public. We know our rights. We know exactly what our rights is. We will shame you. We will expose you as who you are. Which officer are you crying? Are you crying for the officers, Andy? Or are you just crying for another $20,000 that's going to come to your finance, for your campaign finance? You guys are corrupt. You guys are disgrace to this city, and we will expose you. Looking forward to see you in Jones Coffee, Andy Wilson. Looking out there, looking cute, and it's done. Just being a nice
Excuse me,
guy.
your time has expired.
Nice guy is not enough.
Thank
We'll
you.
fire all of your asses.
Thank you. That completes public comment on matters on this item.
Okay. I think there are a number of issues that came up that I would like us to pursue. The first one is, it doesn't help to have a district attorney's office that takes 1, 2, 3 years in matters that, are of very high importance. And all to that. It doesn't help public safety. It doesn't help public trust in any of our systems. And so I would ask that we draft a letter. And Chief, I would ask that maybe you ask like-minded police chief join in a letter with you to ask the district attorney to and the board of supervisors to dedicate more resources to the issue of investigating some of these incidents. And I'd also ask that we add this to this as an agenda item to our annual meeting with our supervisor, Catherine Barger. We can't be the only city that is, complaining and being harmed by investigations that are taking longer and longer. Now, back to we want to get it right. Obviously, that's paramount. We want to make sure that we have all of the information. And if there's an argument to be made by the DA that, we, no matter what the resources might be, we still will not be able to complete investigations in a timely manner, then let's hear that argument and then we can take that issue up. But in the meantime, I do think we should do all that we can as a city and as a police department to persuade like-minded police chiefs, to persuade other elected officials, including our supervisor, to take this matter up with the district attorney together with us. The issue, Chief, and I'm looking at you because there was a question about the body-worn cameras, switching gears a little bit, but that's been raised. That's an administrative matter, and my understanding, Chief, is we paid for the cameras, and this is so when an officer pulls his or her gun from a holster, that camera together with the other cameras in the city would turn on, and that's a matter that you're looking at to implement.
Yes, so council has put the money up, approved it, so to speak, but we're doing a trial on it right now because we have 90 days to look at it to get it right, so to speak, because we do have officers who use different holsters.
Okay.
So we just want to make sure we get it right the first time. So yeah, we're going to start that 90-day trial with that coming up here soon.
Okay. And then the other matter that has been raised, and I'll just ask about that, and that's the issue of setting the cameras to capture up to 2 minutes of footage.
The pre-event.
Right.
Yeah, so we're also doing a trial, or it was also approved by council, which is called Performance, and it's a dashboard. So if there's a critical incident, say that you're involved in, we can look at your camera, go back 2 minutes with Performance to capture that pre-event data. So we're going, while we're doing these trial testings, we're going to test different times, pre-buffering times. So we'll look at 60 minutes, 60 seconds, 90 seconds, 2 minutes. We'll look at the different buffering times.
So I raised those questions, those issues, because those are issues that have been raised together with the issue of investigations. And
yeah,
I think it's important for the public to understand that that you and the department are being responsive to those issues.
Right. We're trying to make it better. Just with this last shooting where the officer didn't have his camera on, well, with signal sidearm, the other cameras surrounding that officer will come on now.
Okay.
So that's what we're looking at.
Including the involved officer, the directly acting officer.
If he has it on.
Okay.
Yeah. If he doesn't, then it'll be captured by cameras surrounding him, him or her.
But we'll make clear the policy that the camera should
absolutely.
be
It's part
on.
of the policy, yes.
And so, this is a very complicated matter. Every time we take it up, it seems to get more and more complicated. But we're not going to increase the public's trust by predetermining outcomes, by politicizing the disciplinary process or policing in our city. We have a civil service system in place that respects statutory rights, constitutional law, and our charter. But I want to remind people that the civil service system that includes right to pre-disciplinary hearing, that includes appeal rights, was not intended to protect employees. It was intended to protect the public from having politicized decisions in employment, to prevent, you get a new police chief or a new city manager or even a new mayor, and suddenly, all of the faces around change because they have complete autonomy. That was the intent of civil service, to ensure that that did not happen. And so we should be very careful about changing policies that put in the hands of either an elected body or remove the controls protecting the public from that sort of incestuous employment practice. And so I firmly believe that we should have policies in place that get us the
Mayor,
outcome.
the last 60 seconds of your
Oh.
comment, we could not hear.
Okay. Well, maybe that's better. I just, I think I was just saying, John, we have to be careful when tinkering with a system that's intended to protect the public overall. We want to get the correct outcome, but we want to ensure at the same time that protections are in place so that faces don't change simply because we have a retirement in one department, whether it's the police department or any other department, or we have a city manager that's new and suddenly, that individual's favored friends are hired, or even a new mayor or majority of the city council. And if you don't have the correct checks and balances in place, you defeat that civil service system and you end up with politicized employment decisions on the part of an elected body or individual administrators. And that would defeat the entire purpose behind civil service, to protect the public and to have integrity in decision making. Vice Mayor Wilson, followed by Mr. Hampton.
Thank you, Mayor. And I think it's super valuable discussion to have in front of the public and those of us who aren't on public safety. There's no easy answer here. It's difficult in terms of law enforcement today, and I think the awareness of how parts of our community have been maybe at the receiving end of some injustices is very important as well. So I think for somebody who's not running for reelection, I'm trying to balance that in the last 10 years of my term to do what's best for our community. And we need law enforcement that are capable and feel supported, but also public that feels like they can trust the system. I'm a little disappointed that we didn't have any statistics about how many offers involve shooting and what the timeline has been in terms of getting the DAs released. I mean, we're kind of talking in theory. It's very hard to know what the stats look like. And frankly, every shooting is devastating to somebody, whether it's the officer or the victim or both. So I wish we had some data to look at and some timelines, because we're talking really about timelines. And the DA we put that as a gating factor in trying to figure out what to do with our own personnel. I do think what I've learned tonight is that is insightful and important. But I would ask that whether it's public safety or our new Citizen Police Oversight Commission, that we look at providing some best practices around maybe separating those scenarios where, once again, we don't know how many times. It sounds like in some cases we've moved before the DA's letter has come out, that if it's clearly egregious, and I think that was a word that Councilmember Hampton used, that we don't feel cobbled to take some action, so that we have somebody who's maybe not behaved well and doesn't represent the city well on the streets, and then we take preemptive action. And frankly, if somebody is justified in taking this action, we give them the right to go out and do their jobs unencumbered. So I think this one-size-fits-all approach is not a good one. I do think there's a set of scenarios where the DA's work is super informative, and that we kind of provide guidance, and we can't make the policy, but provide guidance to the city manager and the chief to, in those cases, wait for the DA's letter, because it's going to tell us how to kind of handle some of those areas that are in the kind of that gray area, that middle ground. So I do think more work needs to be done here, and Mayor, I'd ask you to figure out where that work needs to be done. I think this is, and I thank Councilmember Hampton for bringing this to our attention. Many of us don't serve on public safety, and I know this is a difficult issue, so I know it's been enlightening for me, but I do think having a little bit more data and then providing some input to our city manager and our police chief around best practices. And you said don't change the system, but system doesn't always work right all the time, and I think it's incumbent upon us to challenge the system to do better. I think Pasadena deserves better, and I don't know what the answer is, but I think if we take the status quo as good enough, that's a problem. So I want to look for pathways and strategies that we can do better, and I understand the limitations we have as a charter city, but I know our chief and our city manager is eager to accept or embrace the wisdom of the council and others to do better. So I would ask that you and my colleagues contemplate how to digest that as a path forward. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Hampton.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you to everyone who's chimed in on this extremely serious matter. And to the Vice Mayor, egregious was actually used by the police chief. And then also, I just wanted to mention, you're right. You're 100% right about the system. The system is not working. The system is giving us thousands upon thousands every week. Public commenters that are extremely upset, and it sounds as if the council as a whole and the city's not working on the best behalf of the people. And I understand. I feel for all of those commenters, and I feel for myself, and I feel for my nephews and everyone who looks like me that could be pulled over by the police or anyone, and what the outcome will be. And so I'm going to make a motion. I request that the city manager, it's a motion as a request that the city manager complete all administrative reviews of all employees between 6 and 9 months. Employees including the police department, because they're all city employees. And that's my motion. If I get a second, I get a second. If I don't, then I got another motion I'm going to make.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Let's call a vote.
Excuse me, this is Michelle Bonarise. And
No, we can make motions all the time. So you're about to tell me that I can't make a motion.
Well,
motions happen all the time.
Right. All I was going to indicate was that, consistent with the Brown Act, action taken by the council would need to be based on information that is clearly listed in the agenda, and our agenda does not speak to beyond, you mentioned all employees.
Okay, then I'll specify it if you like. Would it be better if I specify it to officer involved shootings?
Yes, that would be more consistent with the report that's listed. It does say oral presentation, and that's what's anticipated, but I think that the way it's worded, you could give direction to the city manager to come back with something on that subject.
Okay, I will request a motion to complete administrative reviews of officer involved shootings between 6 and 9 months.
Well, those are two different things. I think the city attorney, would you repeat what your suggestion is?
My motion is now to complete administrative review.
No, I got yours, Mr. Hampton.
Directing the city manager to return with.
No, that's not what he's saying.
That's not what he's saying?
No.
Oh. So I need to make a motion to have the city manager return with something?
For action.
Because this is a request, a
request that the city manager come up with a policy.
Okay. I request the city manager, all right, that's fine, that's fair. I request that the city manager come up with a policy to finish administrative reviews of police officer involved shootings between 6 and 9 months.
You can make that motion, certainly, Mr. Hampton. And the council just needs to be aware of the potential inability based on our interpretations of the law, but maybe there is a way that something could be consistent with what you're saying within the bounds of the law.
Well, luckily we have a fantastic city attorney who's going to protect us.
Okay, Mr. Madison?
Thank you, Mayor.
No.
I was attracted to your idea of outreach on the timing, but I wondered whether it might not be more appropriate for the city attorney to have that outreach to the district attorney rather than the police chief, given the police chief's role as a decision maker and the fact that these issues cut across a number of these legal processes that really I would think the city attorney might be better positioned to have that communication. Obviously, I'd welcome either of their views on that, but just wanted to raise that as food for thought.
I'm okay either way. I'm just looking I guess I'd look to the city attorney and the police chief to see who might be more persuasive from an investigatory point of view, whether it's the city prosecutor in her capacity or city attorney or the police chief with the support of other police chiefs who might also be frustrated because their investigations are prolonged.
Yeah, I was going to, I took notes. I was going to check with the San Gabriel Valley Police Chiefs Association.
Yeah.
They may already have something in place because I'm sure they're frustrated.
Yeah.
And then there are other organizations I was going to look at as far as police chiefs to see if they already had something written up.
Yeah, Mr. Madison, I would say let's leave it in the hands of the city attorney and the police chief to determine who might be more persuasive. And maybe it's both. Maybe Michelle uses her. Aren't you the president of the city attorneys?
The City Prosecutors Association for LA County.
There you go. So maybe it's Michelle in her
In my Pasadena capacity.
yeah in her capacity as president of the LA County prosecutors.
Well, it wouldn't be as president of the
Oh, I see.
association. No,
Unless
it would
they-
be in my capacity as an employee of the city of Pasadena.
Got it. And maybe it's both. So I would say let's leave it in their hands to make that determination. The point is we have to do things differently and ask that the DA do things differently, responsibly. I don't think the motion that has been made to adopt a cookie cutter approach and just predetermine that 6 to 9 months would be enough time is a way to proceed. I don't think it's responsible to do that because we're artificially tying our own hands and limiting
That's voted down.
a thorough
Let's vote.
the opportunity for a thorough investigation where more time is needed. So I would say let's leave it in their hands, Mr. Madison. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, so I intend to not support the motion. I don't think, although I certainly understand the frustration and the desire for a sort of a one-size-fits-all quick approach, I just don't think this legal landscape is capable of that. But I definitely support the outreach. I also think, there's another whole element here, which is we're talking about, we're not talking about trash truck drivers. We're talking about our police officers, public safety. And I'm sure all of us saw the article in the LA Times. We all see the noteworthies. Far too many nights of every week, we have shots fired by wrongdoers. We've had, in the last 3 or 4 months, by my recall, a 10-year-old, a 13-year-old, and a 14 or 15-year-old shot, 2 of them killed fatally. That's the other side of what we're talking about here. We ask our police officers to pursue and apprehend and prevent those who illegally possess and use guns in violent crime. And so, there are important interests here that aren't reflected in the weekly public comment of a handful of folks from the community. And I give all the community tremendous weight in their comments, but I would urge us to not forget that side of this equation either. And I find it sad that we don't get any public comment on that 10-year-old, on that 13-year-old, on that 15-year-old. And we should be spending at least as much time, energy, and resources on trying to address those issues as we are on the issues of officer-involved shootings. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And I don't think there's been a second for the motion as crafted by Mr. Hampton in the end.
Provided the second, Mayor.
Okay. So
I had a question, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. Question for the city attorney. So my understanding from the discussion tonight is that we can make recommendations to the city manager in this area that the motion considers, but we can't act ourselves. But it's also clear to me from the discussion tonight that the city manager and staff already have a very clear position on what we're potentially advising them to do. And so this motion would be purely symbolic. Is that a fair read of the situation?
I believe so.
Okay, but I guess I would just say I agree with staff's position that they need to take everything as on a case by case basis, and it doesn't make sense to be limited by a strict timeline. But I do support the symbolic gesture that we need these things to move forward. So I would support the motion at this time, but it's not going to make a significant difference, unfortunately. All that rests with the DA moving things along more quickly. Thank you.
I guess, Mayor, I need to understand then, if I'm being directed to do something, but it's symbolic. Never heard that before. I'm being told to do something that I think would be detrimental in the end to the way we do things in Pasadena and to the fairness of officers, but the community as well, because there are ramifications of having a DA report and a city administrative report that disagree. There are serious demonstrations of that. So I'm unclear if I'm going to symbolically be told to do something. I mean, am I just intended to just ignore it?
I want to make it
I've
clear.
never ignored a council direction in my life, 30 years in local
I want to make
government.
it clear that this is not a symbolism. This is something we're requesting that you do within 6 to 9 months.
Okay. Thanks for clearing that up. Yeah, given everything we heard tonight, and for what the city manager just said, I don't want to direct the city manager to do something that she doesn't believe is in the city's best interest. So I understand the sentiment. So I don't think I would support the motion at this time then.
I guess paying out 25 million, whatever the next money that we'll be paying out, is in the best interest of the city.
Thank you. I think we still have one public speaker who somehow was lost in the ether, but we've located Mr. Shea.
Alan Shea.
He was waiting, but
Mr. Shea, you have
somehow we couldn't locate him.
1 minute, 30 seconds. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I really appreciate the councilman and the mayor bringing forth our truest sense of political science, race, politics, and everything else that goes on in our community. The truth of the matter is that Anthony McClain was murdered. The videos clearly show that he was shot in the back with a cell phone in his left hand, which he dropped going down Raymond on the left side of the street, whereas the gun that was tattered was on the right side in front of the park. The video is so clear that we shouldn't even be wasting our time having this discussion. More than anything, we should not be centered around an infamous period in history where it's so clear to us. This is a chance for everybody to get redeemed that's a part of the city council, part of our officials, especially talking about police actions in which we only have one police officer that was terminated by an administrative officer back in 2007, and the case was White versus Pasadena for a police shooting, and it was her getting shot by her own gun on an accident, and she was fired by the city manager. The city manager has the authority to fire anybody within her confines. So we can't sit up here and say you can't do these things.
Mr. Shea, your time has
It's
expired.
there. And I appreciate it. I appreciate it. So let's take action tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shea. One final point, the request for data made by Vice Mayor Wilson, I think whatever letter and whoever sends the letter or letters should include the data and show clearly how long it takes. for these investigations on the part of the DA. And so I do think we should give them a very clear basis, them being the DA as well as the Board of Supervisors for dedicating more resources to this investigatory function. Okay, there's a motion seconded by Mr. Kennedy. And again, I understand the passion, I understand the desire to move things along, but I will not be supporting the motion. I do think that there's detriment in artificially setting timelines when we should be focused on ensuring that we get it right. And we should be focused on dedicating more resources to ensure we get it right in a timely manner. And unfortunately, that's a function that's with another investigatory agency. So I'm all for asking that investigatory agency to dedicate more resources to move things along, but we have to get it right in order to ensure the public's trust and protect public safety. So with that, we can call the roll.
This was moved by Councilmember Hampton, seconded by Councilmember Kennedy.
Yes.
A request that the city manager develop a policy to complete all administrative reviews for officer-involved shootings within 6 to 9 months. Councilmember Hampton?
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy?
Yes.
Councilmember Madison?
No.
Councilmember Masuda?
No.
Councilmember Rivas?
No.
Councilmember Williams is absent. Vice Mayor Wilson?
No.
Mayor Gordo?
No.
The motion fails. 2 in favor, 5 against, 1 absent.
And let me add one final thought. There should be some thought. Saying 6 to 9 months. I mean, there's no basis for it. There's no data. There's no analysis, and I think that's what we're reacting to. Those of us who did not support the motion, and so we should look at the data. We should ask the district attorney to advise us on what it would take to move that timeline up, and understanding that it's not always going to be possible for all the reasons we've discussed. I don't want to rehash the conversation, but these are all issues that we should take up with our Board of Supervisors as well as the district attorney. Okay, I think that completes. We have 2. Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Hampton, were those your hands up from previous comments?
So, Mayor, before we adjourn tonight, I'd like to make a request that with all of the shootings that have been taking place in the city, I believe the former city manager and possibly the interim city manager have some interventionists who they have retained to help in terms of doing interventionist work to prevent the kind of violence that has occurred. So I'd ask that the group be invited back to either public safety, which I think is more appropriate, to the city council to give us an update on what they're doing in that regard.
Council member, that was a topic actually that we were talking this morning about maybe having on our joint meeting with PUSD. I don't know if you've seen, but Pasadena Media did an excellent interview with the chief and with one of the consultants that we've hired to help with intervention work. And he was very specific in talking about intervention really works best and foremost when in the schools, and talking about how we might be able to work with the schools and have him present for that. I've not talked to the superintendent yet. If that is agreeable, we'll pursue that, and we can either then bring it through public safety as well, or maybe that would substitute for public safety since the full council would be there. But that was our thinking.
Okay, just so long as we, as a body, receive an update, and I want to make sure, consistent with interim and introducing resources in the community to effectuate a cessation of the kind of violence, gun violence particularly, that we have been seeing. And then lastly, it's no secret, we receive regular reports at Public Safety, the number of handguns that were removed out of vehicles by persons who are possessing the guns, who have no legitimate reason to have guns, whether they be ghost guns, unregistered guns, or some other kind of weapon. And then we all need to be concerned in local government when the federal government has told us, as well as county government, that boxcars of guns, this is not speculation anymore, where gangs and others have removed guns off of boxcars, even when the guns were being moved legitimately. We've got a serious problem, and it isn't just Pasadena. This is a national problem, but obviously our electeds are, and we are elected to deal with the issues in Pasadena. Thank you, Mayor, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Mr. Hampton, followed by Vice Mayor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor. Like I said, I had two motions, so if that one failed, I was going to ask for the next one. The next motion is to condemn, since this is the DA, everybody points their fingers at the DA, so I would like to make a motion to condemn the DA for failing to act within an appropriate time period or in officer-involved shootings. I don't know how much time you have to wait for a second, but
I think we're there.
maybe I don't get a second. Maybe everybody's good with how the DA is.
Well, I think sending a letter and putting them on notice is the first step. And also, look, it's a matter of the DA dedicating current resources, but it's also a matter of the Board of Supervisors dedicating the needed resources. And if we're going to hold that office accountable, I think there's some steps in between before we do that. I don't object to being strong and direct with other elected officials, but we first have to do our homework and send the letters notifying and give them an opportunity to remedy.
Everybody has said that the DA is not doing their job here. And if he's not doing his job, I think that we need to make a statement.
No question.
Doesn't have a second, that's fair. And I am going to go on and we'll figure it out. I guess you're going to send a nice letter to the DA and we'll figure out what he said. I'm sure he's already heard these meetings. I'm pretty sure that he has staff that watches these things and hears about these things. And his name has come up in a lot of the press that has come out as it relates to officer-involved shootings. So I don't know what a letter's going to do, but I will follow your judgment, Mayor. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Wilson.
Mayor, I'm sorry, did you call me?
Yes.
I just want to reiterate, I do think the data is important. I just want to make sure there's a venue, and maybe you could describe what it is to look at the performance over time in terms of the DA's responsiveness. I would also ask that, once again, that we, with that data at hand and some narrative around those specific incidents, that we encourage the city manager and the police chief to see whether there's opportunities for them to move systematically more quickly, when the disposition of the situation is more obvious. It's clear that the DA's analysis and report is super important in a certain set of these situations, but if we can get to an expedited outcome and give those officers peace of mind and the community peace of mind, I think it's in everyone's best interest to do that. And I don't know where to have that pursued. I understand we can't mandate that, but I do think that is a concept that's worth investigating. I don't know if that's public safety or Citizen Police Oversight Commission, but I would ask that get remanded or whatever it goes to for further exploration once the data has been collected.
We'll work with the city manager. I see the city manager nodding her head in agreement, so we'll work with her to see where the appropriate place to have that discussion might be.
Thank you very much.
And I just want to clarify one thing. I mean, we're talking about the city completing its investigation, and I'll look to the chief or the lieutenant, but it's not until we complete an investigation and put the package together and send it to the DA that the DA starts his investigation, correct?
That's correct. We put together our criminal investigation.
Yeah.
And then we forward it to the DA's office for another pair of eyes to look at it and conduct their own investigation.
And so we conduct our own investigation, package it up, submit it to the district attorney for their determination. In the meantime, do we just sit around if there are policy questions that need to be answered or policy issues that are in needing of change by the department's determination, or do we take action to remedy those?
If we see something that needs immediate action, if we need to take immediate action, we'll do that. Like I said, with the shooting at Allen and Corson, we looked at our tactics, we look at the amount of rounds that were fired. So we will take a look at these things before doing an official investigation.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Okay, I think that exhausts, at least for the night, this matter. I want to thank everyone again for participating. You know, these are complicated and difficult issues. We all want to do the right thing. You know, we happen to disagree on whether or not an artificial timeline is the correct thing, but that doesn't mean we can't continue to have discussions once we have more data, once we have a response from the district attorney, and we should demand a response from our district attorney as well as from the Board of Supervisors. And I think our letter would be much more powerful when we include the data and the timelines, because it's not fair to anyone. It's not fair to police officers and/or anyone who's been impacted in an officer-involved shooting. And so we'll continue to press. Okay, Lieutenant Gordon, thank you. Chief, thank you. And with that, we will adjourn in memory of two Pasadenans who contributed greatly to Pasadena. Betty O, who many of us knew personally and conducted herself in a very elegant and professional manner that was very effective in serving the residents of Pasadena, and Inman Moore, who struggled with civil rights, forcible rights, and pastoring in Pasadena also made a tremendous difference. And so we will adjourn in their memory.